Hi, Tyria. Happy Friday, and welcome to Guild Chat. I'm your host, Ruby, and we're talking about the prologue, Bound by Blood today. I want to take a second and thank you guys for your awesome response. We've been having a ball watching you play and have fun and give feedback. Your feedback has been amazing. We are going to talk about the making of the episode with a whole lot of our devs today. There are going to be spoilers. We're not holding anything back for this episode, are you done? If you have not played and you do not want spoilers, you should come back and just watch the video later. We also are going to answer some of your questions at the end of each segment, so we're going to get started. But I do have a thing first that I want to show off that you guys haven't got to see yet.
Ooh, I was wondering what's happening there.
What?
All right.
Oh,
wow.
We have a giveaway that we're going to be putting on the website after the show is over today. We have, and I'm going to borrow my notes because there's a whole lot to tell about these.
It's just a really cool box. There could be nothing in the
Yes,
box.
thank you. You know what?
What's
You
in
can
the
hold the
box?
lid.
All right. Lid duty.
Yeah, it's just an amazing box.
Wait,
Check
is
out
the
this
box
awesome
part of the
box.
giveaway?
The box is part of the giveaway.
All right, it's
but
a nice
what's
box.
inside the box?
It is a nice box.
Oh, wow.
Wait, what?
All right.
This is everything I hoped it would be.
That's kind of next level.
All right, sneakerheads. We
That's
have
next
been
level.
working with Nike to make a very, very few pairs of custom Nike Air Force Ones, and we're going to give some of them away to you guys. We have 4 pairs to give away. We have 2 for our NA players and 2 for our EU players. So I'm going to show these off a little bit, but I'm going to give this to somebody.
Oh, Quaggan just took a
Please
dive.
be careful.
Do they all come in this box?
Yes, let me have the
Okay.
box lid.
Here you go.
So
is
they
intense,
come
dude.
in this awesome Blood Legion themed Guild Wars 2 medallion wooden box. Each one comes in its own box.
Wow.
And yes, I gave you guys
I'm
one so you
jealous.
can look over it, but you have to give it back because we're going to give them away.
I mean, do we have to?
These are Ritlock themed, and I'm going to put them over here by the GoPro so you guys can see. Does
That's
that
intense.
show it? Oh, now they say foo. It sounds like they're bad. All right, so
It
these
says
are.
foot. It should say foot. Just that
It should say
change
foot.
the exclamation point to a T.
All right, so these are custom Nike Air Force One sneakers that have been made exclusively for us by Nike. This is okay. Sorry, they've been made exclusively for us. And this is exclusive Guild Wars 2 memorabilia. The sneaker customizations on here are all Ritlock themed. So you have on the toe.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking there.
There we go.
I'm
We have
afraid
the
if I
Blood
touch it,
Legion
it'll like
symbol on the tongue. The shoe
Right.
has a design on the front panel in black and silver, invoking char metalwork. The orange laces are for Sohathan. The lace tips represent Ritlock's red mohawk.
Wow.
And right down here is also red for Ritlock's mohawk and for ArenaNet. The back panel, or the side panel, I'm sorry, has the Guild Wars 2 logo. And the Blood Legion symbol on the tongue and on the top of the box brings all of those elements together. So
Wow.
we're going to be giving away 4 pairs of these. Check our website after the show for all the details on how to enter. Yeah.
That's kind of
All right.
awesome.
Yeah.
You guys do have to give that back. I'm sorry, but we
No.
need it.
Good luck, guys.
Can we just ship the shoes and I keep the
Keep the box.
Yeah.
No,
I
I'm
really
sorry.
like
The box is part of it. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a great keepsake
All right.
box. For
Yeah,
sure.
the box is amazing.
Yeah.
It is rather heavy, but I kind of love it. All right, so why don't we talk about Bound by Blood?
Yeah.
All right, I'll let
I'd
you
rather
guys
talk about
introduce yourself.
shoes.
You want to talk about shoes?
Yeah.
Would you like to hold a shoe later? Will that help?
Sure.
Okay, that's
I take issue.
Just like random.
Oh, come on.
Connor, it's too early. It's too early.
Sorry. Let's go. Introduce yourself.
the puns.
Oh, it's never gonna end.
Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Talk about what you worked on for Bound by Blood.
All right. I'm Kirk Williford. I worked on, the Ooze Pit meta, the Doomlore Shrine meta, as well as the final story instance. Some other events in the open world map, like the target shooting and the chef event, as well as the strike mission up to the final boss.
And Drunk Brim.
That was not me.
Oh, I thought you had some of that.
I don't think so.
We still are going to talk about
That was
Drunk
this
Bram.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that
We
one.
can still talk.
Hi, I'm Navira King. I'm the lead narrative designer on this particular episode. So all the Golden Path stuff, overseeing that, and ambient dialogue and writing Metal Legion lyrics, and I feel like other story-related things. So
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It fits.
that was me.
Connor.
Hello, I'm Connor Fallon. I'm also a designer. I worked on chapters 1 and 2 of the story, which included Drunk Bram and the part where you go and pick him up from the prison. I worked on a couple other events, the Demo Derby, the Smelting event, and I worked on the Metal Legion concert. That was my event. So, yeah, that's what I did.
Awesome. All right. So the Metal Legion concert, I mentioned to a couple people before the Metal Legion concert, we are going to do another Guild Chat next week that goes into the making of this band and maybe some of the people who did the vocals and created these new characters. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, but definitely tune into next week's Guild Chat for that. So. And actually, I do need to make a quick note. The shoes are Nike Airs, but they were made by a customer, not a customizer, not specifically. I'm sorry, Mark has many things to say, so I'm trying to listen and talk. Not by Nike specifically, but they are Nike Airs. So, okay.
Sweet.
All right. Well, why don't you guys start? What do we want to talk about first? Do we want to talk about Bangar and Krisha?
Yeah.
Because they are fascinating.
They are two of my favorite things about working on this episode. So with the prologue, we're introducing, new folks who are going to have an impact on the Icebrood Saga going forward. But, Bangar had been mentioned in the past as Ritlock's Blood Legion Imperator, and no one had ever really met him before. And so the process of breaking it down and figuring out, like, what's his personality like? What's his voice like? Not necessarily in terms of voice acting and casting that, but just, how bombastic is he, or is he very reserved? Or, and same with Krisha, like all the little nuances of who they were going to be. That was actually a really long process. For me personally, a lot of times I need to think about references from other movies or television shows or even book characters that I'm like, okay, this character is sort of like that, mashed with this, mashed with that, and at different times we were like, is Bangar, what is the guy's name? Walter? No. In The Big Lebowski, the one who's like he's like the vet, who's played by John. Walter, yes. Like, we were like, is he like Walter? Like this sort of like ridiculously bombastic character who's like calm, and then like loses his bad word all the time. Or,
Loses his cool.
loses his cool, yes, and just sort of snaps. Or is he somebody, he was such a great military leader, and he's been the Imperator for so long. He's the oldest Imperator, and the longest running Imperator. I actually ended up landing on him being Patton.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe some folks are like, "Who?" General
please
Patton. I
don't
know.
be.
Don't say who. But they might not have seen the movie with George C. Scott, and I rewatched that, and let me tell you, it's definitely from not this decade, but in watching that, the sort of, the way that Patton was for his for like the way that he would give speeches and rally his troops, but also the fact that he was sort of a loose cannon at moments, but he did some really crazy things that paid off. That sort of personality really in the back of my brain, and as I was writing that opening speech for Bangar, was really informing that. So I feel like I'm rambling, but
No, this is literally why you're here.
yes,
so
okay, I'm here to ramble.
We have time.
I love Bangar.
It was really fun seeing the character development just from start to finish of Bangar as a character through the speeches, as well as like the opening mail that you get, the invitation
Yeah.
from Bangar.
Yeah.
Just seeing as the character came into form and how those like the iterations of the letter and the speeches would change. And it's just like he developed his character so I don't know, smoothly. Even like we could see the inspiration, and it was just really fun to watch. So
And the voice actor is incredible.
yeah,
Um,
Graham McTavish.
Graham
is
McTavish.
stellar.
Although I have to say, my favorite thing, I really enjoy he also plays some generic Sylvari in the map, like some of the male Sylvari, and I'm mostly familiar with him from Castlevania. So whenever I run past one of the Sylvari, I'm like, oh, it's Dracula. Like, the Sylvari's gonna come after me.
God.
But yeah, he's
Never
an amazing
happened.
voice actor, and he can't help but sound like awesome.
Now I really want like a Sylvari Dracula side story. But anyway, that's just my brain going into it. Like,
Do you want like a pen to write that down real quick or anything?
I'll just rewatch this video later and be like, what was that inspiration? And then for Krisha, she is Ritlock's oldest friend. Like, oldest friends. They've been friends since they were little in the Farrar, and they were both sort of on the outskirts of their own war band, because, Ritlock, if you've read The Twine, Ritlock was Runtlock, and Krisha's parents are Flame Legion. Her mother was a Flame Legion refugee to the Blood Legion, and so she's an elementalist, so she's a little bit on the outskirts for that reason as well. And so they bonded very young, but they're also very different personalities. So sort of trying to figure out who she was, how she would present herself to folks who aren't Ritlock and Bangar, how she would present herself to Ritlock, what their communication style was going to be. That was a lot of fun to iterate on and read out loud and really, get down into it. And then Charisse Booth is amazing.
Oh, she's so
as
good.
our voice actress for Krisha as well.
Yeah. I know I say that a lot, but our entire voice acting cast is so stellar that every time we call out one in particular, you're remembering the work that they do and who they've been voicing, and it's just so flawless all the time.
I remember when we realized who Krisha's voice was going to be, it was way back when Charisse was doing that the trailer that preceded episode 6 of last season, when
she's Zafira as well,
Zafira does that
Yeah.
great voiceover, and Julia Narden and I were sitting in the back of the recording studio booth, and we looked at each other and we were like, she's Krisha. Yes, that's okay. Yes, yeah, we know who our Krisha is now. And so as I was writing Krisha and developing it, I was thinking about what her voice was going to sound like as a Char, and it really kind of informed a lot of the things that I did.
So at some point we need Saphira and Krisha to talk to each other, and then
You know what? I would not put it past Charisse. I think she could make that happen. And nail it.
Nolan North has done that
that's
too.
true.
Yeah,
Nolan North
yeah.
has talked to himself a lot.
Yeah.
He has talked to himself a whole bunch in our game. So there's a precedent, and what I'm saying is it needs to happen.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Absolutely.
We'll make that happen.
This
Wait,
is
but we're
important.
not promising anything about what's going to happen.
I don't know. You said it was going to
No,
happen,
wait, I
Connor.
did not say. I said it would be neat.
If it doesn't happen, come for Connor. That's
Wait,
what
Oh
I'm saying.
no! This is just spun out of control.
No, I know.
Connor now. I'm so
just
sorry.
All right. Well,
He's
I'll just
closest
leave.
to the door, so please don't speak
Yeah.
him.
Book it.
Yeah.
He's going to be out of here. So I do want to touch a little bit on what you said about Bangar being very cool and very collected until it's something like interrupt me again and I'll have you killed.
Yeah, he's a showman. He
really
is a
is.
showman, and that's some of that pattern as well. He knows how to get his troops' attention up on that stage, and the way that he performs on stage at the beginning is very different than how he speaks to the commander and Ritlock when he comes down at the end of that
even
chapter.
the pitch of his voice is just different. He
Exactly.
goes up when he's giving a speech, and then when he's like, "Oh, hi, Commander," and you're like,
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of that is Bangar's ability to be this amazing battlefield commander. He is a strategist. He reads the lay of the situation, and he makes snap decisions and moves the troops the way he needs to move them with whatever means he has.
And he reacts very quickly. And we've seen a little bit of that in Bound by Blood. The Quaggan are not having a good time. We've seen a little bit of that in Bound by Blood, where he was immediately like, "I hope you all enjoyed the show with our big dragon finale."
Right? Right.
And, he's just okay. I'll roll with this.
Yeah, I'll roll
Played
with
it
it.
off.
I will use it to my advantage because he has to keep control, right?
Yeah. And it's a more simple and obvious thing than moving troops on a battlefield, but I think it seems like it speaks to who he is.
Absolutely.
even things like putting on a concert, right? He finds ways to like bend the message of the concert
Absolutely.
ever so slightly in his
Absolutely.
direction.
I mean,
And like, yeah.
That was something we had fun with for the entire episode, was figuring out how, like, little seeds of, I don't know, propagandistic, how could Bangor use this to his advantage to help,
Yeah.
further his message,
I
even
mean,
if it isn't as
yeah.
obvious.
He has a whole role he started in the Minister of Morale. He has a Minister of Morale, y'all. Like, her whole purpose is to get people emotionally and mentally in the lane that Bangar wants to keep them in, and get them pumped in a certain way and be his touch point out in the world to get that propaganda like you were talking about. So.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this char gathering and how did this come about and what are they? Okay, not just that. We'll talk about that
We'll get
too
there.
because
We'll get
it's
there.
great. But how this came about and what they want to accomplish and how you guys got to this point.
I think that goes into, I know there's probably a question here, but I'm going to jump ahead to
That's
someone's
okay.
question that I'm sure will come up later about this being a prologue episode before the Icebrood Saga really gets going. It was important to us to allow the folks of Tyria to celebrate Kralkatorrik's death. That's a huge thing. And especially coming off of episode 6 of season 4, where we're just fighting. So much fighting all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so much battle. And there has to be a release valve for that. And the Char, they fight hard, they play hard. It seemed like a really great entry point for us to jump into a moment to really have that release in very visceral ways with the Char.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to note that the reason why it was a prologue was largely it's a narrative reason, right? Like, this is the chapter it's kind of tangential, but it's also setting up the groundwork for what comes later. And that was kind of and it was interesting to see like all the different things that people read into what prologue might mean. And we're like, well, they'll be pleasantly surprised when the episode comes out.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's just been a lot of it was a lot of fun to figure out. Like, this is an opportunity to dive deep into the Char before we head up north. Well,
Yeah.
I guess we're going
Elsewhere.
elsewhere.
We'll
yes,
say elsewhere.
In a direction. We move in a direction.
I think,
But like,
You were trying to visualize the map, weren't you? Like,
no, I wasn't doing
Yeah.
anything. Anyway, and it's just an opportunity to really focus in on this on one culture, which is what was knowing that was our goal going in allowed us to make a lot of choices, like doing a Char exclusive helm, right, and really like doing things that are like allowing us to focus on Char in a way that we haven't been able to in a while.
Yeah.
And that was really nice.
It was also how Navarro was saying before.
Yeah.
The episode 6 was so heavy, and
Yes.
it was incredibly heavy in terms of its tone. So we were able to kind of peel back that a little bit for prologue and have it be a little bit more lighthearted.
On the surface.
On the surface, while still starting to sprinkle, a little something. Things aren't as they seem.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
It's a big reason that the map's like less combat oriented, right? It's like we've come off a bunch of those. Let's do one that's a little more calm and like you can spend your time.
Charcoal.
Yeah.
Char Calm
Absolutely.
is just a big loud party.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is something that you mentioned about episode 6 and episode 5 too.
Yeah.
I mean, the end of season 4 was gut-wrenching. Pretty much the whole second half of it was there was just a lot happening, and having a party now that we got through that and we won.
I just realized someone major dies in every episode. In the latter, after like Joko dies, then Blish dies.
Spoilers.
What we literally like?
No.
But I mean, and then Arun dies. Oh no! And then Kralkatorrik dies. Like, we had a major
Yeah.
death
Seriously,
in
in
every
every
single
Spoiling
episode.
everything.
Yeah.
Okay, it's okay. No, I'm warning people. We're
Welcome to the
spoiling
guilt
everything.
chat.
If you don't want that, this is when you need to stop watching.
Yeah.
You should have stopped watching a couple minutes ago, but
It if you're here now, you might as well just stay.
Everything's spoiled now.
Yeah.
I do think that, one of the things that Connor was saying about, focusing in on the char, being able to like focus on one people and allow them in a lot
One
of
char.
ways to, char are people too. One people and allow
That's a whole other guild
them
chat.
to reflect Tyria in a way, is really effective in trying to understand what is going to what's going on in Tyria, not
Yeah.
just on the. The majority of folks at the party are there to party. They really, really are. And yes, we have a whole lot of political machinations and other things that are brewing, that people are not even aware of, even if it's brewing for themselves. But that's sort of life, right? Like, some of these things sort of, there can be drama beneath, the fun that's being
Yeah.
had.
Sure.
So I think that part of being able to spend time with the char and get like a microcosmic, very personal view of what it means right now for people in Tyria, allowed us to sort of explore that, Kralkatorik's death.
Yeah, from a design perspective, it was fun and not something we haven't explored char as much as we
Yeah.
did in this release. So just from design, when you and I and Frosty were trying to figure out how would the char handle these scenarios in a game design perspective, right? Like how do we get a concert to make? How would they handle that?
Yeah.
Just those kinds of thinking about that was really fun from a design challenge.
There's also
Absolutely.
one layer lower than Char, like as a group. There was also, hey, let's bring the differences between the legions and what the
Yes.
different legions are looking for
Yes.
here,
Mhm.
right? Like, I worked on a bunch of the one thing I didn't say that I did was a bunch of the secret, like the whole fact that there's an ash camp that's like a front, and then you like need to solve a puzzle, and then there's the actual like ash camp, like. Ash came here with their own motives. Iron Legion came here with their own motives. They're trying to hawk their stuff and get people to buy their tanks, right? And then Flame. Flame has some really like interesting dynamics in attending this event, and we really had the opportunity to like, especially like from the player perspective, like if you're Ash, if you're Iron, if you're Blood, like for two of those you meet your Imperator for the first time in this episode, and there was a lot of stuff we were able to do design wise, and like, yeah, hey, you should get a slightly different hint if you're Ash. Like Malice is a little bit more straightforward with you about what you need to do to figure out what's actually going on, or like, and I don't know, that was fun to play with from a design perspective.
Mhm.
I think it from a narrative perspective, it just gave us so much rich potential story to mine as well, in terms
Yeah.
of like trying to figure out who Malice and like who Malice is, who Smoter is, how they would be different from Bangar, and like how they would relate to the commander, regardless of whether or not the commander is Char or something else, and allowing us to kind of shine a light a little bit more on what the relationship between the Imperators might be, that we
Yeah.
will hopefully see in the future a little
We've
bit more.
we've
as
never
well.
actually seen any of the Imperators other than Smoter before.
Right.
Like
Smoter.
Smolder.
I have
Or as
I have
Snargle Gold calls him, Smolder.
Yeah, totally different. Oh
Which-
yeah, there's
which-
some people.
Snargle
No one
is
has
a whole
anyone
thing.
found that yet?
No, yeah, they found it.
Okay,
Yeah,
good,
it was
good,
first day. There's
I just wanna make sure.
Yeah,
I
I
just
think
wanna
I
make
think the
sure.
most was now we know what ArenaNet's audience is. It's like saucy romance novel.
I mean,
The saucy romance novels are so good.
They're
though.
good.
it's necessary.
Yeah,
Saucy romance
let's-
is necessary.
I mean, it's kind of the inverse of there's a cultural clash, right? Of the people who are really embracing all these races coming together in many different ways, and the people who are less for that, right? And like, it was, I think, even as I think you talked about this a lot, as we were laying in the undercurrents of, hey, here are the people who are really not for everyone coming together. You also need to have that counterpoint of like,
Yes.
there are Char that are totally like, we're now like a collective, right? We work with all these other
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
We've been doing that for years.
It was really important that
Yeah.
we show that balance too, and not have the Char feel monolithic at
Yeah.
all. I think it would be we'd be doing a really serious disservice to the players and to that story and that race as a group if we were like, they're all the same.
If
They're
there's-
all warmongering, hating.
Not to call out anyone in specifically, but if you have been insisting that char should be a certain way, char are many different ways.
Char are many different ways. Yeah, char are.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because that is as delicately as I can possibly put it. There's a lot of like flirty char happening.
Oh yeah.
You like how I said flirt?
Yes, instead of being like bow chicka bow.
I'm saving that for you.
Okay.
But let's
Yeah.
talk about those conversations leading up to development because, as you put it, you need cubs.
Yeah, yeah, you need cubs. The blood. Okay. So let's break this down for a second. So when we were talking about like how to explore and show, what. When we were trying to break down events, and actually, can we throw that?
Let's
Can we-
show the
let's
whiteboard.
show the
Yeah.
whiteboard. That might be good. Okay, so
Okay.
way back in December,
Yeah.
design and narrative and bunch of other folks crowded in a room. I think we might have been in this room even. And we were like, okay, what are the ways that we're going to show who the char are? How are the ways that we can do that through events? The demolition derby, the concert, the hunting that they can do, the shooting and all of that. And then some of those things had to do with cultural things too. We talk about how into fighting and military and war the char are. We talk about how much they like meat. Well, that's fighting. That's food. There's another thing that folks got to do in order.
Sorry, I don't follow.
Building the
Navira.
Farrar.
Oh,
Building the
all right,
Farrar.
all right.
And
Fighting
so
food and Farrar.
fighting food and Farrar, exactly. So part of this, think about it. The Blood Legion are the infantry. They're the infantry legion, and
Right.
infantry means you need bodies. They are very focused on their cubs, and so it started to make us think like, well, what are the courting rituals of the char? At one point, we were like, we got all these legions coming together for the first time. Lore has already said that like legions. Mating for
Intermingle,
life
yeah.
is mating for life is a rare thing among the char, and Krisha and Ritlock, who have a very close relationship, that's a more rare thing to have a cub and then stay that close to someone. But we were like, okay, so if you're gonna maybe get it on with someone from a different legion, like what does that look like? What makes them attractive? And so on the whiteboard, we had this moment where we were like, okay, so what makes char attractive to each other? And maybe we should have them have like, there's no like char Tinder, there's no like Chinder, and so we should.
The size of their axe.
It's this exactly. It's like what you do with it. And so we were like,
Connor, are you okay?
I'm fine. Go
so
on.
we were at one point up on that board. It was a long meeting, y'all. We were in the room for like 2.5 hours, and like the phrase sex bonfire actually ended up on the board. And if you look at that whiteboard picture, if you
can see
see
where we
it's
erased
where
it.
we've crossed it out because we were like, maybe we shouldn't call it that. But underneath that, it's like,
And yet here we are.
What,
Yeah.
I mean, like, this is Guild Chat. You guys get to know all the behind the scenes stuff. But we decided it shouldn't necessarily be an event, but it is still important
Yeah.
that we deal with the idea of like, char people, and people, they find other people attractive. There's like relationship stuff there. Like, how does that work? And so I have to say, I had so much fun writing ambient conversations that were like flirty, or somebody checking somebody out, or like talking about their cubs, or like whatever, like adding that layer, because it just makes the char more real, I
Yeah,
think, as
Yeah.
opposed to like caricatures, So
People are again going to this party with different motivations.
I mean, like anyone who's ever been to a music festival, I'm just being truthful.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
there's that.
All right. And thank you for the whiteboard picture because there is so much good stuff on there.
You guys, if you like dig into it, you'll be like, what does that mean? Yeah. So,
And you'll see a lot of things you recognize.
I think there was something up there that actually said Bangar equals President Snow ?
Oh, yeah.
Because we were like, oh, is it? I don't know. This is, like I said, this was back in December, so we were still figuring
Trying
things
to
out.
figure out
Yeah.
who exactly Bangar was. And I can see that President Snow, there's more going on behind the surface. He's not as benevolent as one might hope.
Right?
Yeah.
But we'll have to wait and see what happens
Have
with
to
him.
wait and see.
Speaking of cubs, we didn't talk about Ryland, and this has been an episode full of not quite bombshells, but we've got Ryland, the Flame Legion are here. There's a lot happening. So do
Yeah.
you want to talk about Ryland a little bit?
Ryland. I feel.
I feel like we left Ryland still kind of mysterious because most of the Ryland interactions were you pretending to be Ryland.
Yeah.
So
Which
it's
was
kinda
amazing, by
like-
the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk a little bit about how, because like I worked on some of the early drafts of like the Ryland hanging out with Bram scripts.
So good.
Which was really important.
Yeah, and
I'm going to lead you into that, talking about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I think as we were trying to, this was not to be Ryland's episode necessarily. We were putting him on the stage in a way for Ritlock to react to a little bit more, but also his relationship with Bram was the way that we would get to know a little bit more about Bram and set that up going forward and get to know a little bit more about Ryland. So
Yeah, I mean it's it's again a question of like there's the kind of this now that the episode's over, there's this question of like how genuine was their connection, and because there's some really nice moments in their conversations with each other where Ryland's really supportive, right, of Bram and like the things that Bram's struggling with, because they actually do have a lot in common. They both have been like they both have larger than life parents,
Yes.
right? They both like there are a number of things for them to bond over. But you know from at the end of the episode that Ryland had a goal, right? For like the entire time, which was to drink
You can-
Bram,
it's okay. You can-
drink Bram under the table and get the bow, right?
Right.
Like, and it's. I remember I was watching a stream where it's the moment someone realized that what Ryland had been up to the whole time, their mouth just dropped open, and but it was important for us to make those moments like between them genuine,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
and they are genuine.
yeah. And that's why that's why one of the things I implemented was like a chaperone achievement to like go check in on Bram, so you can just get a little bit more of those interactions and like and see a bit of that. Do we have the video of the extra Bram call?
I think so. Mark,
So-
you have okay.
Yeah, I want to give some backstory to this. We obviously iterated on these a number of times, and there was one that we didn't. That was the final one that was a little too light for him to be in jail the next episode. So we ended. Sorry, the next chapter. So we replaced it, but apparently we didn't remove it from the scripts, so we got it recorded anyway, and the delivery is great. So I'd like to play for you the extended edition Drunk Bram scene.
Alex sticks his head in the room and goes, "Go to the tape."
Hey, Commander! Stop. You'll never guess where we are now. We are right outside Bangar's office. Ryland says,
Well, Bram, that's not a good idea.
Commander, you have to be quiet or we'll get caught, okay? Uh-oh. Security's here. We gotta go. Duh.
Yeah. So that was that.
That is just- I love it. Stop it.
Yeah.
I think that that's also a good example of how we were iterating on the situation with Bangar and how serious that was going to be and
Yeah.
what the drama was going to be, because once we really solidified the serious storyline, it was like
That's fun,
yeah,
but it's too light. Yeah.
that was too light. The idea of breaking into Bangar's office and moving things around, we were like, oh no, like, you know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah, he'd be killed.
that's not the Bangar we're dealing with anymore.
Yeah.
Like so.
No, but it is super fun to think about. And honestly, the whole Bram getting progressively more hammered
Yes.
and drunk calling you over and over was, there's a lot going on under the surface, but it was such a funny, light thing to have in there.
I'm always surprised when bits of my temp dialogue get through to ship. My favorite one. I have two. I'm unfortunately responsible for we put the band back in Warband in case me making bad puns was not obvious. It did not make that obvious, but Bram, one of Bram's chosen insults when he's doing the taunting is "Go suck a snowball," which is like,
You know what? Sometimes they're gems.
yeah.
Sometimes they're
Honestly,
gems.
put the band back in Warband is one of my favorite things.
Oh,
I
thank
didn't know that was like a temp thing until I think you told me last week or something, and I was like, I'm so glad that.
Oh yeah, and then it starts showing up on posters, and I'm like, oh my god, what am I showing?
I mean, there was a lot of stuff from this episode that kind of started off as like, there's no way. There's
Yeah.
no way this is going to make it through.
Well,
That's
the whole-
true.
and
That's
we'll,
true.
We'll go into this more next week, but the whole concert itself was
Yes.
just like, oh, haha, wouldn't it be funny if?
Pin. Next week, tune in It's on. But yes.
Yeah, but the concert was just like a funny idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely like people were talking about what are some of the crazy things that Char could get up to at a party, and I was like, well, they totally have music, and like, oh, that's crazy. Then like I think I came back like the next day, and I'm like, I want to actually do it, guys. Like, I think I know how I do it. Anyway, but yes.
And that was fun because as this idea grew, people started getting attached to it.
Yeah.
And we started finding as many ways as possible to make things work.
Yeah.
Like, just how can we make this unique and fun and different than what we've done before? And some worked better than others.
Yeah.
So,
I think also just trying to find ways for me on like this is a great idea for an event and it's super super Char. How do we hook it into the themes that are going on at the same time? Like, how do we make this a little bit darker? Or how do we make it like a reminder for players of, this is a culture that is it's a military culture.
Yes.
Like they are soldiers even when they're having fun. This is about the legions coming together. The Ooze Pit event is a great example of that. Like the theme of you guys will be better if each of the individual legions who have these strong, ways of fighting, if those things come together and they work in tandem, right? So that was a lot.
In the Flame Legion like chain of like, hey, look, we're trying to like connect with everybody. Like all of our metas tie into our themes, which the whole meta cycle was an interesting. That kind of evolved over time. Like initially we were talking about just doing 2, and then it was like, oh no, like we're really close. Like this one feels like it should be for this legion, and then it's like, well, I think originally Doomlore was not Ash themed,
That's
and then
correct.
we figured out a way.
Yeah,
You can talk more about that.
well, I mean, you pretty much nailed it, right? Like, we kind of tried to shuffle things around. Does this make more sense to be Flame? Flame effigy obviously is the obvious one. Do we want the Ooze Pit to be blood? Well, no, the concert's blood.
The concert's iron.
Backwards.
Yeah.
So just trying to figure out where it fit in, and even though in Doomlore Shrine, like it's technically led by an Ash Legion captain.
Flame Legion.
Well, no,
Oh,
it's,
yeah,
it's an Ash operation.
Yeah.
But it's essentially a Flame Legion shaman trying to prove their worth. Show the other legions that hey, Flame has something to contribute here, and that's one of the themes that we were trying to go for the Flame Legion in general. Is like we are more than what you thought we were. We've changed. We want to prove our worth. So
And we're important if the Char want to win anything. And I think that's one of the things that Bangar recognizes as well. He's like, I want the Char to be this great force, and I can't if we're not complete.
We're not united.
I want to quickly touch on the Flame Legion thing because I think we were talking earlier about how Char contained multitudes, right? Like, yes, there is a dominant culture, but within that culture, there's like several offshoots, right? And every individual is different. The Flame Legion was very interesting for that reason, right? Because it's like the Flame Legion was real bad news, and like they and Ephraim. I think you did a really, really good job of having him be like, he's someone who grew up in a culture that was built around bigotry and is just kind of like, I've had enough and I want something better for
Priska.
Priska.
My cub.
Yes,
You
Priska,
guys,
Priska is
my
his cub.
favorite.
Yes.
I love her so much.
So when my housemate plays the game, my old housemate, and when he sent me an excerpt from, I think he's this like RP Guild's chat, and one of them, they had a picture of Priska, and it's like, whoever this cub is, I will defend them with my life.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah. It was
that makes me really happy.
Yeah, it was really sweet.
Maybe we'll see Priska some more.
She's my favorite. We need to see Priska some more. So yes, confirmed. Priska is Ephraim's daughter.
Yes.
Priska is Ephraim's daughter.
Yes.
Yes, you heard it here.
Probably first. I
Yeah,
don't know.
probably.
It's mostly just questions.
It was confirmed here first.
Yeah, we'll never answer.
go with
I don't think we'll ever answer this, but it's interesting that like the timeline of I'm curious about Ephraim. Like, has he evolved as a character? Right? How did he become?
Yeah, I think that I'm going to say that yes, Ephraim has evolved as a character because he is.
You mean from like where he would have been 10 years ago?
Yeah, I don't think that Ephraim's always been this had this sort of a perspective on hatred and what it can do and how dangerous it is and why the Flame Legion needed to make this change. I think that he's definitely someone who has had some experiences that have evolved his worldview.
Yeah.
And to the point where, the Flame Legion, they are swallowing a lot of pride in coming
Yeah.
to the All Legion rally. Not just that, the deal that Bangar makes, and if you probably heard this in some of the ambient, the deal that Bangar makes is that you must bring your cubs to join our Farrar. They must come into the Blood Legion Farrar, like at a certain age. So to make that sacrifice to bring your young ones in, on the one hand, from the Flame Legion, it's like, yes, we are well intentioned. Like we definitely are committed to this. We're going to bring our next generation with 100% good intentions. And then on the flip side of that, of like the sacrifice that you're making to do that, and they're pretty much refugees, and that was a delicate thing that the narrative team, we really wanted to explore as well, because just because you're asking for help doesn't mean that you don't have pride. And what does that conflict feel like? And internal conflict, but also when you recognize that there are some amends that you have to make. So there was a lot that was going on there, and then the evolution of that Legion, because if you're coming back into the fold, well, then that means you've got to get rid of some of these old ideas. Like your women are going to have to, like your girl cubs are coming into the Farrar, and they are going to learn a different way. They're going to become the way that, Char have been historically. So, it was challenging, but I hope that we did a good job with, showing the nuances.
There were a lot of story threads that we couldn't really deep dive into in the Golden Path because there just isn't time. And the ambient dialogue did a lot of heavy lifting on a lot of those things. Like you wander around the Flame Camp and you get bits of the story, but people talk about, I'm going to butcher his name, the old Flame Imperator. I'm not even going to try. Gaharin, yeah. People talk about that very thing. Like two female now soldiers are like, what does this mean for us? Like, are they going to make us train now? Like, and there's just a lot of, I don't know. It allowed us to accomplish a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something too. That was, and we kind of laugh about. I love Priska. I would die for her. She honestly is. She is my favorite. I love her. But all of that conflict between the ways that they were thinking and coming back into the fold and making amends and giving them your cubs, all of this, I feel like Priska, she articulated that in a way that was really touching, where she was talking about, I miss my old friends. I'm having trouble with the other girls.
Yeah.
And I'm in this Farrar that I didn't ask to be in.
Yeah.
And then there was a story step where you're looking for the one-eyed Char, and you pass a bit of ambient dialogue where there's a Char saying, parents checking on their cubs. It happens more often than anybody wants to admit.
Right.
And it speaks to a lot of what's going on there that we're not really paying a lot of attention to, but is still part of the world.
People are still curious. I mean, it's not an official part of the culture, but like in your personal story, you have a choice. Who your parent is changes how people view you. Like there's still some of that going on. And Priska is the person who, later in the story, raises the alarms, right? Like, and talks to Ephraim.
Yeah.
It's like things are kind of
I'm
weird
hearing some
here.
crazy stuff,
Yeah, like.
Out of the mouth of babes.
I love her.
Yeah.
Okay. I could honestly sit here all day and talk about like Char culture and interaction
So
with
could
you guys.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
We have been doing this for months. We have not gotten
Oh,
tired.
it's so good. But I also want to touch on the events. We talked about those a little bit, but I want to delve into those. Let's talk about the, I keep calling it bumper cars, and that's not.
The demo derby.
Demo derby.
Let's talk about the demo derby a little bit.
Sure. So originally I was trying to do. I actually didn't set out to make a demo derby. I set out to make.
Well, guess what?
I know. I set out to make a race, right? A different style of race where you're using the char car, and no matter what, I couldn't. With the speed that mounts give, a race and a transform just feels slow now. Right, and I could do things to try to override that, but like the animations got weird. Outside of like making a mount that was a char car, it wasn't really reasonable. And it was like, well, we've already got all these cool. What are you looking at?
It's okay. You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. We've already got all these neat skills that basically came from the World v World char car. So we basically let's do what these cars are good at. Which is blowing things up and blowing each other up. And the demo derby is a very destructive party, right? It felt like it hit the theme. It's like, look at how cool our cars are at blowing each other up. and it's there was a lot of questions. Like we haven't really done. I call the event like a collaborative PvP event because the way it works is like
That's fair.
everybody gets credit when somebody dies, but you're also trying to like score the most points for your
Yeah.
legion. And there, we haven't really done in a while sort of an open world PvP event. So like there was a lot of unique things to test and see if they worked. But the very early on, it was clear that like it was enjoyable. But then I had to contend with the giant Arene statue being put in the middle, which wasn't there in the early prototypes. But it worked out
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I knew it was going to be there, but I was kind of like, it'll be fine, and it was fine. But like it was interesting. It did change the feel from the rink being a circle to a donut, right? It means like
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
hide behind the statue and position yourself differently, and yeah.
I feel like I missed an opportunity to have the demo derby announcer say say something about the fact that statue was in the middle there.
Oh yeah.
And add a little bit of the fear of Aurene nuance to that. Damn it.
Oh no! Oh, that would have been amazing.
Oh well.
Yeah.
I'll pass Navira.
Next demo derby we do with the
Yes.
giant Arene statue.
Yeah,
in the middle,
absolutely.
you
I
can-
will make it happen.
Okay, that's
Sunday,
a promise.
Sunday,
No,
The next
stop
time-
it.
Lots of things here,
Stop
Connor.
Connor needs to stop.
Yeah.
No, she's the keeps turning.
No. The next demo derby we do with a giant
Yes.
Arene statue in the middle.
Yes.
The next one, yes, we
Yes.
can do that.
Yes, the next time that
Absolutely.
happens.
There you go.
Yeah, totes.
It has to be that exact set of circumstances.
It'll
Yes.
be like a
But it can
flashback
happen.
or something.
Oh yeah, remember all the
Okay.
characters are like, remember that time we were in a demo derby, and then you do
And
the. And then,
Suddenly, Scooby Doo.
but there's also that was also talking about little touches for if you're a char and you're a legion. Like if you sign up for the demo derby, like instead of being like just a sign up for a random legion, if you're Ash Legion, Ash shows up at the top and it's like my legion, Ash. Like I want to support them.
Yeah.
And then of course you betray them half the time, but whatever.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's okay. So, well, how about the ooze pit?
What about the spit?
Actually, I would love to hear some more about how that came about. How do you work all of these legions coming together? And
So we went into this map knowing that there was some locations from GW1 that we wanted to see if we can get, bring back in
Yeah.
a way, and this ooze pit was one of them. In which case we're like, okay, how would we bring this back in a way that makes sense in context of a big, a char party, the Blood Legion? What would the Blood Legion do with this area? And it was a case of, well, they might have maybe they domesticated the oozes in a way, and they're starting to use them, farm the oozes for their ooze to use in whatever, to sell
would
or
you
what
farm
have you.
them
as one does.
Yes, absolutely. So they
They smell
turned
like
into
sewage, though.
Sorry.
They smell like
They do
sewage,
smell like
though.
sewage,
Yeah.
but that makes them more valuable,
Yeah,
I
okay.
think. Anyway, it's true. That's canon now. So it was a case of, okay,
It
what
was
can
not
we
me
do
this
here?
time.
It was, yeah, actually, it was you this time. I don't know.
It says the description underneath the champion ooze says it smells like
Smells like
sewage.
sewage.
Yeah.
So from there, we're like, okay, well, what would the Blood Legion do here? Well, going into the themes of unification, and they're trying to use this entire event to prove that everyone is one char. Can we use this for Gladium to come and kind of reprove themselves to try to rejoin a new warband, or show that I'm still valuable to a legion, and so this was a case of, well, aside from the Flame, who theoretically hadn't reemerged yet, there'd be there's three lanes. So we're like, okay, what can we build that have more thematic ties to the Ash Legion, to the Iron Legion, to the Blood Legion, in which case, is, as I think you said before, Connor, or maybe you should know better. Either way, it was Blood Legion is the numbers, right? They're they just throw bodies. So
Yeah.
it's like they need to separate and understand how to move around in large numbers to figure out their goals, right? Ash needs to be a little bit more secretive or stealthy and try to accomplish goals and infiltrate. Whereas Iron is just a little bit more tinkering with, in this case, plumbing. But figuring out that, and then it was a case of, well, how do we get them to learn the mechanics of their individual lanes and their individual legions and bring them all together in a way that makes sense and teaches to one char. In which case, that was obviously the Grand Champion ooze. In the idea there was, design-wise for players, was to hopefully have players communicate what they learn in their individual lanes into one part, because that's why there's call-outs in VO saying, hey, Ash, you're up. Iron, you're up. Blood,
Yeah.
I'm not you better do good or I'm going to be disappointed because the announcer is Blood Legion.
You've been like me when I'm disappointed.
It's true. They might have you killed or something. It channels as banger.
Probably.
But anyway, so it was a case of trying to get the players to communicate. Learn the individual lanes, and I think it was really interesting from a design perspective when we shipped, just seeing players communicate. Doing what we were hoping players would do and have that behavior of communication and just building a community and helping explain that there's differences between the legions. So that was really fun to see. So
Nice. All right, so it's getting very late.
it is.
But I want to ask, I have a couple more questions for you, and then we will hit on the questions that you all in the forums asked. What was your favorite thing to work on?
For me, it was probably the target shooting event, just because that event started off in my head as something that would theoretically be pretty simple to build. I was prototyping it while we were doing the whiteboards about what HR party was, and it was a case of, well, this is just something that I'm enjoying to come back to and just do for fun.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, let's find a way to make this work. Okay, well, there's a Farrar, there might be a target shooting area or marksman training. And then it ended up being incredibly complicated to actually get working because of the use of moving platforms that happen. And one of our programmers, Joel, ended up being a lifesaver in multiple ways across building this event because there was a few things tech-wise that our engine wasn't really handling that well. Like, if you don't move on a moving platform, but you are still moving on the moving platform, the game might not have known you were still moving. That was weird, and it was fixed, and Joel is a lifesaver there. But it was
That sounds like Joel.
yeah, and then having a bunch of targets that are also moving up and down, but they need to be player-specific. It was a lot of connected, crossed streams, which we know we shouldn't cross streams. So it's a case of trying to get those all to work. And I think it was really successful and really fun, and I just keep enjoying coming back to that event and just shooting things just because it's fun. It's like
so glad.
Connor built like a Destruction Derby event and a concert, and we have a third-person shooter essentially in our this map has a lot of really
and
cool
a
lot
cooking
of
sim.
stuff.
yeah, and a
Oh,
cooking
yeah.
sim.
Yeah.
There's so many unique
So great.
experiences
And
that
a
we
stealth
haven't really
game.
done in an open world
Yeah.
setting
Right.
before.
It's like
So
a huge
that
carnival.
one's my big one.
Yeah.
Carnival.
A charm.
Yeah. I like all the
Karaoke.
portmanteaus.
Yeah.
Karaoke. That was the one thing I really wanted us to have that we didn't have was karaoke.
Oh,
It's okay.
I'm sorry. There's so much, though.
Yeah.
All right, so
Sorry,
what about
Rebecca.
you? What was your
I
favorite thing to
know.
work on?
I, other than building up Bangar and Krisha and figuring out who they were, I would say that the complexities of presenting the differences between having pride and patriotism in who you are and who your people are versus nationalism and that sort of like exclusionary feeling and pitting those things against each other in very reasonable ways, that was a real challenge to show that okay, you can see how someone who has one char doesn't have to be a bad thing, and it shouldn't be a bad thing, to say we're all united, we are better when we are together, the things that make us char are wicked and amazing and should be celebrated, but that doesn't mean that then we should go off and kill all the folks who aren't char. Do you know what I mean? But having that sort of balance there and showing that people's fears can be played into, the vacuum that Krakatoric brings, the fact that there's a new Elder Dragon, and the way that the Bangar is able to drum up this feeling of it's an arms race. It takes people's fears and then plays into their pride and morphs it into something that's problematic. And so trying to figure out how to do that in a way that still allowed us to have fun and ratcheted the tension in a way that started off as good, everything's good, everything's a little bit weird, that's okay, it's still good, still go, oh crap, okay, and then and then also weaving in Ritlock's family drama, because it's you're invited to his twisted family Thanksgiving, and you're the guest at the table, and then they start having a fight, and you're oh snap, that's how I felt about
Yeah.
constructing that story, and so I think that's what I had a lot of fun with. It was probably those are the things that were the most difficult for me, but also the most rewarding, the most fun. So
How about you?
I mean, obviously the concert, but other than the concert and the demo derby, which you've already talked about, I found there was a lot of fun actually in the precursor event to the demo derby, which is the one where you're collecting scrap and you're throwing it in the
Oh,
furnace.
yeah.
The little mini game where you pump the bellows and you
Yeah.
it was a lot of a lot of the stuff we do is finding like things that we've done and doing them a little bit differently. So in this case, I literally like Eric had made the script for like the spiders, right, trying to break out of the spider webs, and I'm like, I'm gonna take this mini game and like tweak it a little bit, and it'll become Pump the Bellows, and the dynamic of like needing to balance like the trying to collect the things while also balancing the heat of the furnace kind of added a extra dimension to that I don't know. I really just kind of liked the way it flowed. I'm very happy with it. And the way, I guess one of the things that's kind of nice about it is that I was happy with it very early on. So I was like, oh, this works. On to other things,
Oh,
right?
gosh,
Like,
that's amazing.
Which generally you're like tweak, and I'm like
Yeah.
that one like got like fell into place rather easily, which was a nice feel, especially because I was trying to do some other crazy things,
What?
and having one of my events be like, okay,
This
was
one's good.
nice.
Set it
Yeah,
aside.
yeah,
You can
yeah,
move
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I bet that did feel good.
Yeah, the Ash Stealth Adventure was also fun, mainly because like, I was doing a lot of weird things, like having little dummies that are patrolling on a path, and it was interesting trying to get that to balance out and work well.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
All right. We have a couple of quick behind the scenes things
Okay.
that we want to show off. I think that came from you and you. We had the char on the tank.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Can we show that, and then we can talk about what happened?
So, in early iterations of figuring out like what we wanted the char Metal Legion to do, like we wanted to have them come in on a char tank, right? These things are really rad. They're all over the game in char areas, but they're not very used very often. This was a early prototype trying to figure out if it would work. In this case, it didn't work. It was a case that, they shout, "Witness me," and then slam their heads into the ground. But it was just trying to figure out, using our mount tech, can we get it, attaching them to the right points. We wanted to have the guitarists on the sides, the singer singing,
Yeah.
almost Mad Max style, flames everywhere, the drummer
Oh, that's the
in
first
back.
place we all went.
Oh, absolutely. So it was a case of just figuring it out. In that case, we didn't really have the time to invest in getting that working in that way, partially because of the way that the environment worked out.
Yeah,
Like,
there's a giant
there's
cliff.
better ways.
It's hard to drive a tank up a cliff.
Right. There's better ways for us to accomplish this. We can make it feel cool in another way.
Yeah.
So that was that case, but it's still really fun outtake to have, and it's maybe something we can look into eventually someday. But yeah.
Okay, and there's some that I'm saving for the Guild Chat about Metal Legion.
Excellent.
I do want to talk a little bit about the Char Rat King and what
yes.
happened.
Okay, I know Eric's planning to talk about this a little bit. Let's bring
Yeah.
up the Char Rat King.
The rat
It's
king?
Oh.
a bunch of tails. It's a bunch of char standing in one place. Yes, the char ball.
Char Ball. Is that what
So we have char moving dynamically throughout the map as they're attending events. This was it's actually a surprisingly interesting. It was an interesting problem to solve, how to get that to work well, and it wound up being a lot of collaboration between Tracy, myself, and Eric. But one of the earlier implementations had an edge case where if I was did we bring up the thing? If I was debug running the concert early and then they were called to the concert again, they would be like, "Oh, we have to go to the concert, and the concert's location is this specific point."
It's this one little dot.
Yeah, so they'd all move to the same point, and the result was this multi-headed, 8,000-tailed char abomination that would just be standing in the middle of the concert and cheering occasionally.
The frame rate killer.
Yeah. It was there's like 80 char that move throughout our map for these events.
Oh
So
my
this
gosh.
is literally 80 char standing on one point, and I'm hyping it up, and I'm waiting for the GIF.
Yeah.
It's up. I can't get it.
Oh, okay, it is up.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was.
You
It's
get Eric to
just
show it.
those.
Yeah.
It's just
No,
one
it's
of
up.
those weird edge case things that
Yeah.
we never would have thought that this would happen, but now we got to fix it.
The way it worked in the initial implementation was the char, when their crowd script told them to dynamically move to a location, they reached it and then they entered a tripwire that's like, okay, now figure out your specific location. But the first step was to go to the point that they're all supposed to meet up. And what was happening is if they triggered during the concert, they were already at the concert. So they never entered the concert area.
Yeah.
So they just they'd stop at the step of, we've reached the point. This is where we're good. This is where we're supposed to be.
This is my
not
life
Yeah,
now.
this is my life now. I like
they
that.
all fuse. And, one char.
One char.
One
Literally.
char.
It's not what we
So
intended.
yeah, that's what it is. It is the one char. Then
God.
it is
Like
spoken
Voltron,
in,
but
in
different.
spoken in legend and horror stories.
Oh,
to
God.
It's
char
like
cubs.
Voltron, but infinitely worse.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Horrible.
All right. Well, do you guys want to burn through some questions real quick?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because people have them. I feel like we've answered the first one. Was it fun to create Krisha and Bengar?
Yes.
Yes. Next
So much
question.
fun.
Yes.
Is Priska Ephraim's daughter?
Yes.
Do you, Novera, plan the ambient dialogue to have payoffs in later episodes?
Sometimes. I think for this particular episode, the ambients were very important to sort of support the overall sort of deep dive in some areas about like what it means to be Charo, how the different legions are feeling, how individuals are feeling, to just give players a different like more nuanced views into the culture. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
All right. So, and we're going to talk with the map artists about this a little bit too. But how do you start creating a map that players already know from Guild Wars 1?
The first step is booting up Guild Wars 1 and going into that
Yes.
region as much as we can. That's something that we've done in the past with Istan and with Jahai Bluffs, and some other areas. Obviously we try to revisit these areas, understand that there was events that happened here.
Like
how-
Krakatoric emerging from the
Right.
ground.
So that's a good example for our map. Is there was in Guild Wars 1 in this region, you could see Krakatoric's spine, a little bit of Krakatoric's spine, and we're like, okay, well, he's no longer there. How would that change the world, right? In which case, Krakatoric's emergent zone was just a massive crater that filled with water, and how do we make this make sense? What would have happened when that happened when he emerged? Would it cause huge earthquakes? Long Eyes Ledge in GW1 was an
Yeah.
outpost that is now completely destroyed because of the results of Krakatoric emerging. Right, that was an interesting sound.
I'm sorry I got distracted, but that was
So just figuring out those kinds of things, like I said earlier with the Ooze Pit, with Doomlar Shrine, with the Keep, how when we were building the Keep, we were saying that was the gateway to the Shiver Peaks. How would the Char and the Blood Legion handle
Right.
that? How would they have built this area? And we're trying to just do our due diligence as much as we can to make it make sense and have it feel like this is the same area from GW1, just it is hundreds of years later, and it has grown, but it's still familiar. So that's really one of my favorite parts of when we start going into these, is just figuring out the design challenge of how do we make this feel like it's similar, but obviously much later.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. All right. So, who came up with bringing the Norn vendor from DR and having him sell bread? Also, where is the Silvari who had his waterproof baskets destroyed?
Okay, so one of the things is at a festival, there's a bunch of people trying to sell stuff, right? And we had this revelation that we could bring back a bunch of old merchants that people like, that are kind of like my favorite. It actually started with dropping the Amnoon "You Buy Awakened" in a tent.
I love him.
And I was like, well, who else could we find? And he obviously, and so I basically was searching for interesting seller dialogue, and there's some that's still in the game, and there's some that's is never used again,
say it.
what?
By Ogden's beard.
Yeah, we were
Ogden's hammer.
looking
Hammer.
at
Let's say
maybe
this.
bringing back
Wrong
by
movie.
Ogden's beard. It didn't work out. But one of the dialogues that I just found, it's not in the game currently, that I love is the story was like, fill the emptiness in your life with local merchandise.
Exactly.
But about this specific one, I had already found someone who had really over the top like weapon dialogue that cited the fact that they were selling weapons, and then I found. He's the Char who's like, get some blood on it, it'll sell better. Like,
Yeah.
I have the best weapons for killing. Blah, 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 blah. And he's
Yeah.
a very scary weapon merchant. And then I'm looking through this other dialogue, and I find the Divinity's Reach guy, and he's also actually selling weapons, but his dialogue doesn't specifically say that he's selling weapons. He's basically like a crazed berserker, I'm slashing prices, like vaguely indicating in those directions. And so I just had it so he has a conversation on him when you talk to him. He's like, so buy my bread. And you're like, wait, what? And it was kind of this emergent thing of we already had like a very scary Char weapon merchant. So how would another weapon merchant react and then maybe sell something other than weapons? Yeah, so yeah, that's it.
I think for the Silvari, that's actually, with having all these merchants from all over, because it's an all Legion rally, and non-Char, well, this is a good opportunity to sell some stuff.
Seriously.
So we could also kind of play into the dynamics that some things this fear is turning to hate, and it's getting a little bit dangerous, and something is going on underneath the party. That's where that Solvari came from. The idea was, in my brain, that that this is a Solvari who used to, come through the Blood Legion homelands on a regular basis, selling what they sell. And this particular time, they've been vandalized, and it's just like something's not right. What's going on? And just one of those conversation pieces. But I don't know that we have actually look for this. I don't know. Maybe you'll find this Solvari. Well, I'm not sure.
I really like the note that particular ambient dialogue has, where like there's these two Blood Legion people who are like sad, and then one of the traveling person's like, I'm pretty sure this wasn't an accident.
Yeah, wasn't an accident. Oh, how about them Dodgers? Like that's
Well, and you see that elsewhere too. There's an Asura trying to set up their stall and getting grief from a char.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of sprinkled through, and that is absolutely a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah. All right. So how about who is Ephraim, and is he related to Geharon?
Not.
You can choose to pass for the sake of intrigue.
I feel like we'll see some more Ephraim in the future. Just wait to see Ephraim in the future.
And his kid?
And Priska,
Yay!
if I have anything to say about it.
All right.
Priska's now the main character.
Yeah.
Priska is now the main character. I'll take her.
I can answer that top one.
Go for it.
So,
You should read it though.
how
I
did
don't
you
think it's-
choose which characters were in this release and which weren't? Kaz, Jory versus Canuck, Kaith. One of the things going into the prologue is that we hear, what the players are saying.
Sure.
We recognize we haven't seen Kaz and Jory in a really long time. Like they were working with refugees from Krakatorik's emergence and everything, and so. In bringing them in instead of Kaith and Canuck, we were able to sort of lean a little bit more into the Flame Legion story and that refugees, but also the aspect of war changes the world. It changes individuals. Like after this sort of big event, things are different. And being able to come back to Cass and Jory after so long and seeing how people have noticed this, like how their voices sound a little bit different. It's the same voice actors, y'all. It's just that they are reflecting the fact that Kaz and Jory have been through some things.
Yeah.
They have seen some like rough effects of war, and they've been personally affected by it. And so you're seeing that reflected in the way that they approach things and how they speak now.
They do their hair.
And how they do their what Cass looks like is different a little bit because she's evolving because of her experiences.
Yeah.
So it allowed us to have another window into how Tyria has been changed.
It's also just when there's kind of this undercurrent mystery, it's nice to have a detective character around.
I mean, we were missing Jory.
Yeah,
for
and,
sure.
and
Oh my
this
gosh,
is, this is definitely one of the things, having worked on the Ash Legion camp, and the very deliberate choice to put Jory there is like, I figured this out, I'm here. It's a very deliberate excuse to let Jory, like, express those things that she hasn't been able to do in a while of, like, just observing and learning things, and I don't know, it was a lot
Let her
of
do
fun.
Flex
her
those
thing.
muscles.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to touch on this top question, but it's part of a question. I have the other half here.
Okay.
I didn't quite make it up there. How did the females in Flame Legion regain their right to fight on the battlefield, and how are they feeling about that right now? And then how are the males feeling about it?
Okay. I'll start definitely from the females. So how do I okay. So I think that anytime you have a big change like that, I think that part of what was the first sentence that you just
How did the females in the Flame Legion regain their right to fight on the battlefield?
So in part of the acknowledgement of the Flame Legion that they're past, that they needed to evolve past, the things that were separating them from the rest of the Char, and sort of not devolve, but evolve back to what they were in a way.
Right, yeah.
Was the recognition that there shouldn't be any aspect of life where the women weren't also equally participating. I think a lot of folks make this assumption that because the women weren't on the battlefield, they didn't have any real meaty jobs, but there's more to being a military culture than just being a soldier. So they could have been trained as battlefield medics. They could be. We already know that they had like all of the all of the sort of the things that are support and administrative around the military, our military life is sort of what we were leaning towards for the Flame Legion females, and some of what we were sort of seeding with some of the conversations, and even with Priska and her "I miss my school with the girls." It's not like they had some sort of like completely changed way that they raised little girl cubs versus little boy cubs. It's just that they were in different schools, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think that for the older women, there are some who are like, this is changing my entire world. Like I don't know how. Like I've been told I'm not supposed to fight. Like what am I supposed to do now? And then there's other women of that same generation who are like, look, you're naturally able to do this anyway. You're just going to now. Your claws are unsheathed. Like do what you need to
Right.
do. But be proud of the way that you've supported your legion up until this point. You're not lesser than the other women from other legions who were soldiers. So I think that there is that. But I think more than what the men of the Flame Legion and how they're reacting to the women of the Flame Legion changing, it's a women of the Flame Legion looking at other women from other legions and how they're reacting to them. So it's that balance. And in terms of like, I feel like anyone who is here at the Blood Legion camp, at the All Legion rally, who has come with Ephraim, is on board with the change. It will be a difficult change, and I think that there's like, even with Ephraim, there's going to be some like 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of situation with changing the way you see the world and how you react to it, even with his daughter. But, you know, they're on a journey.
Yeah. Okay, so because we're running super long on time, so we have a ton of questions. I'm going to have to just say we can't answer all of these. We can do one more question from the list here, and then we can take 2 questions from live viewers because I don't want to completely leave you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
out.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
pick one more.
Map design workflow. Okay. The question is, what does map design? Are they on the board? Can they see the questions?
No.
Okay. What does map design workflow look like? How do you go about designing and making maps now? How does the story affect that? From a very early stage, we talk about like what are our overall objectives in this map? Where is it? What did it look like before? What are some of the, especially if it's a Guild Wars 1 map, like what are some of the key landmarks that we have? We have like the Ooze Pit, we've got Doomlore Shrine, Krokatork's Emergent Zone.
Defining our boundaries.
Yeah, and our first step tends to be drawing a bunch of circles, right? Like this circle will this is where we vaguely feel the Ash Camp will be, and this is where the Flame Camp will be. Oh, are they too close together? There was a big discussion of, are they too close together? Are they far enough apart? Like, how are they supposed to interact? Do we have people traveling between them? Basically blocking out the space for different activities, right? And then it becomes like, the next layer is like, what are the events, the specific events, where will they go? That also changes like like we need to now a space for a stage, right? We need a coliseum around the Ooze Pit that carves out a bigger chunk of the space, right? And we kind of continue to do this, like it's kind of like a layer cake, right? And like, you know, Tracy's like layering in her map art, and we do more and more stuff. And then like towards the end, we start putting in things like, all right, where are all the hidden coins, right? Where are the little, like, where are the devourer nests that you have to deal with? Like, so yeah, it's this process of like like we do one phase at a time and continue like broad strokes and then fill out the details and shift things around as more information comes in.
Yeah, and we also do towards the end. Well, throughout the entire process, we revisit the circle idea and try to do a density map. You know, making sure that our events aren't too centered on one particular area of the map. For a while, that was something we noticed with ours. Is like there's a lot of events in the keep, and there's a lot of events in around the concert in the south, but there wasn't as much in Doomlar. There wasn't as much in the top left corner.
Right. So
Rusty
put some
Meadows.
of the races up there.
So there's the race. You know, there's in the crater area. There's a race down there. You know, there's the dragon adventure that goes over that area. Trying to fill out the space and encourage different kind of gameplay for different kinds of players. Whether they're explorers, they're fighters, things like that, and just making sure there's something. A reason to go to everywhere in the map, every part.
I mean, and one of the big parts of it is figuring out what areas are more or less dangerous, right? Like the Doomlore area is one of the more dangerous areas in our map, and so we built it to look like that. And also, if you go there, that's where there's a lot of natural hostile spawns, as opposed to like the crater, which Aureen just cleaned up. It's just this peaceful place to like hang out and go on a skimmer race. Like, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, I think you guys answered everybody's questions. This has been like an hour and 15-minute information
Right.
dump. No, don't apologize.
the
This
things.
is good. This is a good thing. So I will release the three of you.
All right.
Like
Alright.
little mini krakens.
Do we get to take the shoes?
You still
Yeah.
can't have the shoes. I'm sorry. They're for them.
Fine.
I guess that's acceptable.
whatever.
How are we supposed to walk without the shoes?
That is a you problem.
I have my.
You problem. That's the best answer I've ever heard. That's
Totally
a
fair.
you problem.
All right, so thanks all three of you. Thank you. You guys were the first Guild Chat guests in our cozy space. We mentioned this during last week's Let's Play with me and Clayton, that we are, due to construction, we are moving into a much smaller space right now. And you guys can't tell, but like when you look at the overhead camera, normally Mark is on the other side of the room. I can reach over here and like touch Mark's table. Mark is like right here. It's very cozy. It's very warm. And so congratulations. Thank you both.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all three for being in our tiny, tiny space.
Thanks for having us.
So,
Yeah, as we figured out what the layout was like. So, and
thanks
thank
for
you for all the
playing, guys.
information.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Really happy
I
you
will let
liked the
you get
episode.
back to work, and you guys stick around because we have some more dev guests. All right, welcome back. And we have two more of the Bound by Blood developers to talk about what they worked on. So why don't you both introduce yourselves and talk about what you touched on this episode?
I'm Tracy, and I'm the environment artist, which means I kind of did the whole layout of the map.
I'm Eric. I'm a content programmer. This episode, I was mostly a programmer, filling in like lots of little needs for the designers to do things that they couldn't quite do before or were too painful, and then a little tiny bit of design work at the end.
Awesome. All right, so why don't we start by talking about the map itself? Because I have heard nothing but compliments, so congratulations.
Yeah.
It is, how did you get started on, okay, what do we want to put here? What do we need? How does this all going to fit together?
Yeah, usually when we kind of approach a living world map like this, we're given a little bit of direction from both like narrative and the design team of, okay, we vaguely are in the, MS Paint style scribble on the overworld map.
That's
of, like,
honestly my
basically
favorite.
this rectangle.
Yeah.
And then, if there are specific locations that they know they're going to hit in the story, we just kind of make sure that those are within the bounds of the map we're making. So my only real direction when it came to was basically this Grothmar area was kind of, oh, we might as well try to hit these points of interest that were important in Guild Wars 1. Otherwise, we're going to have some kind of Blood Legion char fort thing somewhere, and it probably means we're going to have to tangentially touch on Krauk in some way.
Yeah, totally.
But at that point, it was very amorphous in terms of what the rest of the map was going to be filled with. And then Aaron Coberly, who's kind of the art director side, kind of came in and was like, the main direction was just make it as happy and pretty and like pre-searing Ascalon as I could try to pull out.
And you're just like, yes.
Well, and given kind of the overwhelmingly like angsty direction of all the previous maps, it was
pretty
very
dire,
nice. It was
yeah.
very nice to get the direction of like how many flowers can you put
Right.
in before the FPS will keel over.
Shackles are off. Yeah.
That was the thing we talked about in the first segment, how basically the whole second half of season 4 was just, it was so sad.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
all of a sudden we're in like a party map and it's great.
Yeah, but see, then I almost immediately hit a roadblock in that I was looking at the char props I had available, and even the trees that historically have meant Ascalon, and it was kind of like, okay, well, but this is fall, and everybody also wants me doing happy springtime flowers, but also all the char set are very dark metal, which doesn't lead to a happy scene at all. And so I was like kind of panically running over to our concept artist being like, what would it mean to do happy metal? And so that was one of the struggles that both I had. Concept, like Sveta did an amazing job of kind of helping me figure out a silhouette to that
Go
fort.
Sveta.
Yeah, all the call-outs now.
Call-outs are great because we can
Theo-
never fit
Theo
everybody
helped,
in here.
Theo helped me with Doomlore too, and I'm sure I'll go back to that at some point. But then, James Barwick and Kyle Bash were my prop artists to really kind of, okay, what pieces can we add to really make this feel unique? Because this is the first time we've really done a Blood Legion kind of themed thing. So a lot of our sets, even had like Iron Legion logo, built in, or paint splashed on the outside. So we're kind of combing through and be like, okay, what new materials are we going to have to make? How are we going to differentiate their architecture from the Black Citadel? And so we kind of settled. Well, I kind of settled on the idea of, all right, let's make it feel a little more bulky and more substantial, because a lot of the Iron Legion stuff feels kind of like scraps, almost like tacked together.
That fits.
Yeah, and so we're like, okay, well, if you're far more, infantry focused and militaristic, even beyond what we've seen before, maybe you're going to have far thicker walls and, battlements and everything else. And then we had the added lore kind of possibility of, okay, well, maybe there was this earthquake. I think Kirk might have touched a bit on it, of like Krauk emerges.
Right.
Long Eyes Ledge essentially has a landslide right next to you. It's breaking off your access to your dam. Maybe the top of your keep's even been ripped off or whatever. So it's kind of led to this amalgamation of, all right, the base was stone, and then maybe they kind of had to build on top of it as quickly as they could. They're still allies with Iron Legion to a certain extent. So that's why you kind of ended up with, if you look closely at some of the bricks, it's kind of like breaking apart in certain areas.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like they came in, and on top they kind of like, okay, we tied it together with extra iron kind of to get it back together, in a short period of time. Because I think that was about 20, 25 years ago or so when they would have had the worst hit. But then, they've offered folks to go help with all the other war efforts in the interim. So how much would they have rebuilt in between? So that was one of the big struggles. How do I make happy metal?
It seems to have worked.
Yeah.
Because you've articulated it a lot better than what was in my head, because you actually made the thing.
I went through the struggles of Kyle and I yelling matriculations at each other, trying to figure out how a castle kind of would be built by Char, and what would be important to show and make.
Well, that's one of the things that I've been loving is that I've mentioned this on Guild Chat before, but I fell in love with Guild Wars 1 way back when. I was just like reading a book and my husband was playing, and I glanced up and he was standing in pre-searing, and I had this moment of, what's that?
Right?
And
Yeah.
boom, I was
there?
in love.
Yeah.
And it gave me, and this is something that I've heard from a lot of you, it gave me that pre-searing feeling, but it also felt very Char.
Yeah.
So now I know
that's why
why.
I hit the good
You
middle
did it!
ground then. Yeah, that's why it's like even for the war downs, I wanted to keep like a few spots that were just nature, just beautiful trees, pretty light shining through them, and having some beautiful mountains in the distance that weren't entirely threatening yet. And we knew that the Doomlore area was going to be a little more on the kind of creepy side of things. So, what other spots can I reserve to just be pretty? So
It worked out
I
super
feel like
well.
I'm hurting. all
No,
the
it's
time
great.
over
I
here.
mean,
You're allowed,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
mean,
okay.
yeah, you should. Yeah.
Please stay,
Bask
because
in
we
it.
have stuff for you too.
It's
now.
all good.
I mean,
I enjoy the
he
map
did
too,
He
man.
did the vistas.
Yeah, I actually
so
want to talk about the
tangential
vistas,
tie-ins here.
because I've done the vistas maybe more than once, where I'm just sitting there going
Well, that's
and
good.
loving it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so vistas, they're kind of different people do them differently. Some people are just escape and want to get back to the game, and that's
Right.
totally cool. And some people just want to see something pretty and get that moment of just like. I know the first time I did vistas was on Jahai, and one of the first instincts that I had was to be a little crazy, and it's not really what we're going for there. So okay, we got to slow them down. But I did this time. I did say, okay, now I know I'm going to do vistas this time. It's not just at the end, and I kind of. My approach is always like, first I get locations from Tracy, who tells me like, these are the cool spots. Like, let's highlight these. Okay, and then I put something together and I run it by these guys. These guys being Tracy and then Lath actually helped out too, our QA
okay.
embed. Yeah, they both came over and were like, that's cool. If you tweak this, and then that is trying way too hard. I like what you're trying, but maybe not. And we had a couple of those, which is absolutely fine. That's what I need.
Or
Keep
they
it in
just
check.
made us car sick. And we're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I
Maybe
know.
not that
no.
extra spin.
Yeah, well, there's always like you want to show more than you can. They're only 20 seconds, so. But this time I also kind of wanted to turn each one into, that I could anyway, kind of a little like story beat. So there's, it's usually like show something and then reveal something else. It's not just like, oh, look at how pretty this is. So, and I actually found some spots that I thought worked pretty well to kind of tie in with the narrative of our story. This might be stretching. This is like 10th grade English class, like reading into poetry. But like the Blood Legion, the Blood Keep, like you were just talking about, right? That one starts on the bridge by the brig. You're headed inside. And it's pretty obvious. You're like, okay, I'm going to go through this gate. And you don't. You have these expectations, and then we take a left turn, which I thought was kind of fitting for episode. And then you come up and you look, and you can see like there's the chef area and the bar area. There's a little bit of silliness and revelry. Again, kind of fitting for our episode.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually kind of stay there. We bring the commander into frame, kind of rising above it all, always kind of appropriate, but also for our episode. But then actually even above the commander looming is Bangar's office, which I thought was appropriate. And looming above that, you're suggesting with the silhouette, is the cold shiver peaks. The mountains are up there, looming harder, which I thought was super appropriate for our episode. So like we had a chance. It's kind of the same stuff in the farm one, the Rusty Meadows. Similarly, like a lot of that vista is just like, why are we looking at this rusty pipe? And to me, it was like, this kind of is about Char, and they're like, I mean, this episode
use
touches
of the landscape.
Yeah, well, and also even just like they kind of have an old way of thinking that we are exposing here. There's a lot of like latent xenophobia and other problems that they're trying to move past, and so we see this old and busted way of thinking until we rise up and see, oh man, this place is gorgeous. If you just get past that. Or it could just be a pretty thing, so that's cool too. Like, it's all good.
I quite like the first idea.
Yeah,
But the concept of telling a story through a 20-second vista is something, I mean, that it took that much thought. And it wasn't just like, I don't know, what is some eye candy that we can like pan around?
I mean, some of
there
them
was
we
still
have
that
to.
as he pans through the Bandcamp dragon.
The band camp was like, sweet, let's go through the dragon, let's do it. It couldn't be stopped. And some of them, there are limitations, like the effigy one. I really want to do like a Rocky over the shoulder, like Philadelphia Steps
yeah.
thing, but you don't actually know if the thing is going to be built or burnt at any one time. So I'd be like looking over the shoulder of a Char that's not there, but like, what am I looking at? I don't know. So some of them, there's some,
Fascinating
horizon.
ivy.
yeah, so like that
behind
one
it.
has to be kind of like, it has to kind of be up above so you can see it regardless if it's burnt. So there were some limitations, but several of them are kind of trying to at least sort of echo slightly what's going on with the episode.
Yeah, I didn't think about that with the different states of like the effigy.
I didn't either. Until we ran it, I was like, oh
Yeah.
no, this is not going to work at
The
all.
internal playtests expose some portion.
Yeah, well, what can you do?
Well, we've talked about before. I mean, there's a lot of times there is something you can't see. It just never happens to be in that state until it hits live, and then we're like, oh, we tested this 400 times, and that never happened.
Yep.
So you got lucky this time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we found it. Yeah, but that definitely. I mean, some things do slip through, but we caught this one. So yeah.
That's interesting to know. That you're telling a story in there. I'm going to pay attention to them now with an eye to that. That's not pressure.
No, I
That
mean, it's
is-
all good. And like this being vague like that means people can read in their own meetings and stuff. And some of them are just like the very end of the Doomlore one. We usually kind of whatever our movement is, we kind of decelerate to imply we're going to stop fully, and then we fade to white. That one actually keeps going up because I wanted it's not so much to fade to white like a non-diegetic one. It's kind of like implying the fog like swallows you. It's like the fog is what's fading. So it actually keeps panning up all. It just kind of felt like a horror movie shot thing because this is a spooky forest. So like I don't know. That's a neat touch and it makes my heart warm. But like, will people notice? Probably not. But that's okay. It's all good. You know, take what you want out of the game. That's
now
what
you
it's
will
all about.
notice.
Now you'll notice. Yeah, you'll be like, oh, it's still panning. I guess that's a thing. Sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit about populating the map once we got it, because you had your hands in a lot of these pies.
Yeah, and I was actually making notes before because, in past episodes, it was like I did this instance or I did this boss fight, and it's like that's a thing. Here, I was like, well, I did a little tiny piece of like everything. I don't even remember them all. I have to have a list.
I have the list.
Well,
so-
that's good because I might lose it. I think the main one that Connor mentioned on the last segment was the roving char band, right? That came
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Like the crowd. We thought so. I think there's a lot of people that went into this. I think it was Frosty's idea, just kind of tossed off, like, wouldn't this be cool? Back to work, and the rest of the team kind of picked it up. And then you had to go paint the roads, right?
I had our NPCs follow nav mesh that's slightly different than the player collision.
Yeah.
And there's a way on top of that I can tend to indicate that I think Connor actually had to set up the preferences for how strict they would be for following those roads. But yeah, I had to essentially go through and indicate on that nav mesh where it was like the ideal place
Right.
for various NPCs to pass along. So yeah, all those kind of dirt roads you see actually have kind of a painted equivalent for the NPCs so that they
Yeah.
won't run off into trees and stuff, which is what happened originally.
Yeah, well, and then even after we had it, Connor had it set up with the scripting. We could get them to go to events correctly, but coming back was a big problem. And so, like, definitely, like everybody seems to be going back, but then two char have made it to their spot, and then some other like train of people comes running over their campfire, like coming through. We got to get back, which didn't look good at all. I was like, I can't ship with that. And it turned out there was a bug underlying. So Alina, another programmer from another team, and I went in and checked it out. And so it involved just like they were using the wrong brain, effectively. The brain was working, it's just using the wrong one. So we got that updated correctly, and then suddenly we got this sort of ambient storytelling. It's like we have the UI telling you where to go for things, but this was kind of like, hey, I wonder where they're going. And so if you follow them, like they'll all go into the ooze pit and take up their spots in the seat, and they'll all go to the concert and be idiots, and then they'll all go somewhere else. That was a term of endearment. I am absolutely like, Mosh, let's do it.
I was going to say, I will join that idiot
it's all
concert
good.
legion. I love it.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I guess for populating the map, I do things like I place the resource nodes and stuff for populating like physically, but then the rest of it was just, I mean, I did the investigation for Connor mentioned we tried to make the derby into a race, and then like I was the one messing with the physics to see like I wonder how fast we can go. Turns out not that fast unless you build a proper
Unless
mount, which
they
is
look
really
like
hard.
they're flying.
Yeah,
kind
well,
of
and the
awkwardly
physics desyncs, so it's
yeah.
like you'll be zooming in and then you're gone in a blink. It doesn't look right, so
Ooh.
that's why we had to go to the derby, which I thought was a way better result anyway.
Yeah, the derby is fantastic.
Yeah, I thought so, but that we had to do that investigation to see like, can we do like speed boosty things? Geez, I don't even remember what all. Like, the concert we had, the hype thing. You would, if you were pointed in the ground, you wouldn't hype people. We had to debug that. Lots and lots of little touches.
Hungover Bram.
Yeah. So I talked about a little bit about this the last episode we did. We added this imposter tag, which was for Blish and the Prairie Dog, that whole saga thing.
Oh,
We did
that was
this-
great.
Yeah. So we did the same thing with Bram here. The difference is we wanted, because in the Blish case, you get to the story step and then you run around the world and there's a Blish with you. Here it's much more limited in space. So like if a bunch of us are all talking to Bram, Like my Bram should walk up with me when I finish talking with him, and
Right.
your Bram should not depend on him, or you'd have to wait for him to get done and come back and be drunk again.
Yeah.
So you get your own Bram, but we can't just swap it out for a prairie dog here because it'd be a lot of prairie dogs all like en masse, this wagon train of them. So we had to add something where we could hide them properly, and that's scary because if we do it wrong, we might melt the servers because we're just spawning infinite Brams that only one person can see. So we added new tech, and Connor added a way to kind of safeguard so we could hit a button and like it would highlight all the Brams on the map. So yeah, we had these like floaty
That's a
cross
weird
swords
thing to
running around.
say.
Yeah, right. But you can only see one Bram, but it was basically a bunch of invisible Brams with a marker on them. So it's just like there's the ghost of Bram walking away.
Game development.
Yeah, right. So that sequence was actually way harder than most of the things I did. That and the lights at the concert were much harder than expected. So we had a cool way.
Ben could have warned you way back
Yeah,
during
right.
raid development.
We had a
too.
way to change the ambient, like actual place lights that you put in, right,
Yeah,
at the concert.
but there was no fade, pretty much.
Yeah, well,
for
I just
some
meant
of
the like
them.
lighting on the ground and stuff. I
Yeah.
think you placed that, right?
Yeah, well, I placed a lot. There are several different combos of lights to get that to work because the lights that you see that are kind of doing the god rays out of the those are a separate prop that just is colored. And so essentially, so that's not a real light.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just
Sure, yeah, it's just a prop.
Yeah, it's just a prop, and then there's other lights that are actually on the ground.
Yeah, so that part I meant.
and so that threw you for a bit.
So the lights on the
But-
ground, what makes everything else take color. So like the stage
Yeah.
looks green or whatever. That comes from these environment lights, right? We had a way
Yeah.
to change those. I didn't add that.
but that's and that was made for the previous raid that I worked on. But we still had traumas with getting them to fade nicely
Yeah.
too.
So what I'm
so
talking about
they
is the
kinda
actual
snap.
physical stage lights, the like big piece of metal with a
Yeah,
beam.
yeah, yeah.
There's like a physical beam in the physics world, and Tracy made that, but Connor wanted the lighting on the ground, so like the stage looks green.
Yeah.
He can change that, but if the light is shining a blue light, it looks a little weird, right? It's like
Right.
there's this blue beam that makes them green on the ground. So he's like, is there a way for us dynamically, for designers to mess with, to change the color of that light? No. How hard would that be? Like, well, that goes all the way down to engine. Here there be dragons. Like, I was worried. I've never touched that, but we tried it and we got it. It had like a tween to it too, which means that he says like make it red and do it over 3 seconds or something. So some of the choreography in the concert, we were trying like, okay, this trigger makes them all purple to test it out. So like the like ground lights go purple, they turn purple over a few seconds, and it looks real cool. So we only wish that we'd had this on some previous episodes for like the psychedelic mushroom area. We could have
And
gone
it's still,
insane.
wow.
it's still pretty traumatic to do because poor Connor was bearing witness to me pinging him like individual, like each of those lights had its own GUID, so a huge
Yeah.
chain of numbers, and there was no easy way for me to send it to him other than just basically like pinging
Yeah.
him like Word documents with like 20 different lists of just numbers.
Yeah.
Like, this is the blue light slightly to the left,
Yeah.
and this one's the yellow light on
Right?
the stage.
When we were trying to test it. Translation, the concept's complicated. They'll talk more about it later. But we added some text to make the lights change
Yeah,
color
yeah.
so that it really,
Wow.
I mean, probably there's way too much going on anyway to know. But I'm always like, hey, watch the lights. Check them out.
Yeah.
Look at
Yeah,
that.
hey.
You
They
don't
turn
know what
purple.
we went through.
There's so many little things like that where I'm just like, hey, we're sure to watch. Okay, well, I'll just keep going. That's fine.
Connor sent me a document that we'll show next week that just talked about how everything involved with the band members changing positions.
Yeah.
And he was like, here's
Yeah.
what that looks
The
like.
size of the script, there's so much going on.
Yeah. So we have
There's
a
a lot.
tiny bit of that to show next week. It was I had no idea.
Yeah.
And hearing that also the lights were a
We,
thing.
we can all
Yeah.
talk from our various disciplines about how long that concert took, but it
And-
was worth it.
Yeah, and at least Connor was smart. He mentioned last time how he grabbed the whack-a-mole from the spider for something, and then for the concert, Pyrotoric is actually the Etten who grabs people. Like the Etten, there's a bounty in Jahai, and Etten will pick up a person, but most people
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to them because it's just one. And it was kind of sad. It was like a one and done. Like, okay, well, he came to me. He was like, hey, can we get that for this Pyrotoric and maybe crank it up to 11 and like grab everybody that we can fit and chuck them off the stage? And I was like, actually, probably. Let's try it. That took us maybe like an hour to just grab it and update it. So he was smart to get some reuse. And yeah, we tried to do that a little bit in this episode to take something that worked, crank it up, and tweak it. Yeah, so it let us do some bananas things. Like, it was great.
So one thing that you worked on with the concert that I do want to mention is the unlockable emotes.
Oh man. So yeah, the unlockable emote. So that kind of started as like a side project. I think the story goes, like I have my headphones on and my back to what's going on sometimes, and I only hear part of it. But I think one of our animators came by, Chuck, and said, "Hey, I made this thing. You should make it into something." And by this thing, I mean the rock out
Yeah, yeah,
animation.
yeah.
And I was like, "Well, that's cool." And so then I heard the Connor and Kirk, like, scheming. And they asked me, "Hey, Eric," I'm like, "Oh, leave me alone. I'm busy." And they, I would never say that. They said, "Hey, what would it take to make a new emote?" And actually, it turns out I said, "No problem. I've made commands before, easy peasy." I hadn't made player-facing ones. 'Cause we don't really do that. And in fact, I learned there's all these extra steps. And I even, my story was, I found a piece of code that I needed to change, and I didn't know why it worked the way it did, why we'd chosen to make it work the way it did. So we have a way in Perforce to go find out whose line of code that is. I was like, I'll go ask him. Well, it said Mike's laptop. And I was like, Mike's laptop? Who's Mike? I think it was
We
Mo's
have a
code.
lot of those.
Well,
we have a lot of mics.
But from that era, I'm pretty sure it was like our founder, Mike O'Brien, his code. I'm like, nope. Touch that. Walk away. You've hit
hurl your entire computer off
this
the
is
roof.
like at Minecraft where you've hit the bottom. Like, nope, it goes no deeper than this. So nope. But we worked through it, and there are a lot of extra challenges because emotes actually predate our tool for making all of our content. It's pre-Duo, so like there's no localization. I was like pasting Chinese from an email into this thing because localization didn't want to touch it. I was like, well, I don't want to touch Chinese. I don't know if I'll get it wrong. Like I might paste it wrong. So we worked together. But that piece and then adding the unlockable part, it kind of was like, well, this is sort of a personal time project that actually came together. Is we're like, I think we can actually ship this. Can we ship this? I think we can ship this. So we pitched it to everybody, and it went through the formal process, and I think we'll get it. So I wasn't really in charge of how we determine like the achievements you got to do to get it or the reward track, but actually getting it to work, like it was a much bigger project than I thought, but I think it was worth it because it's pretty cool. And it caught people off guard. They're like, wait, back that up. That trailer. What did they just say?
Yes.
Like, okay, sure. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the trailer in the next segment, but yeah, that was one of the first things I went looking for. Once that rock out emote was in the trailer and the trailer was out, I'm just like sitting there scrolling through Twitter going, come on, somebody notice it.
Yeah.
And it was so gratifying when they did.
Oh, and I should add, I think this is okay. I'll ask
Let's
for
find
forgiveness
out.
if it's not. We added one other piece that some people have been asking for, and to know what your emotes are. There's a /emote list. It will just tell you all of them. It's in the game, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything. But we didn't message that out maybe as much as I saw some people wondering. So if you're wondering, it'll actually tell you too. If you don't have Rock Out, it'll tell you where to get it, stuff like that. So like, I don't know. It was helpful for me, and so that was another piece of the tech. We had to go figure out how to do that.
So what's the command again?
Emote list, all one word. Like,
Okay.
yeah,
/emote list.
that's it. Yep.
All right, go do it, but not until we're done
I
here.
hope I got that right. I think I did. I think it's emote list. I made
If
it.
you
I should
didn't,
know.
somebody will tell you
Yeah,
in the next
somebody
30
will tell me.
seconds.
Yeah, it's
It's
cool.
going to happen. All right, well, we actually have a number of questions for you guys. Do you feel like answering questions?
Yeah.
I
I'm
hope
delighted
so.
to get questions.
Okay. All right. So, who decides? And this is kind of a question about who does the work. Who decides what is and is not added to the map?
A little bit of both me and design, because if it's going to be a site used in the story, or they know that they want a specific site for an event, then the artists tend to just get told that. Like I knew early on that we wanted to make sure to be able to include like the Doom lore, like at least a point of interest, even if we couldn't go there. And same with the Ooze Pit, and to an extent Long Eyes Ledge. But there are other sites like, what do the War Downs look like now? What does the crater even look like? Like we kind of knew that there was probably going to be a crater, but that's the direction that I tend to get is there's a crater here.
Make it happen.
So for a
That's
lot
all
of
you got?
well,
It
that's
looks
that's all I
amazing.
usually get
Oh,
though.
man. I didn't. I see.
Well,
Okay.
I worked on Cormier's library, and all
That's
I
fair.
heard was make Cormier's realm, pretty much. And
Goodness.
so I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and the same thing for the fort. It was kind of like we knew that we have to have for the story we'd have to have Banger's office. We'd probably need the Farrar to tell some of the narrative beats we wanted. There was probably going to be some event sites. So
Sure.
I think by that point, we probably knew there was going to be a kitchen. The bar kind of actually came later because I had pieces.
Yeah, okay.
Char have a surprising number of pieces to make like bars and
You
mess
guys need a
halls.
bar? Yes, we do.
So I
course we do.
kind of stuck
Make that happen.
it in there, and then Frosty was like, "This is mine now."
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Well, and that's how it usually works. There's certain areas where maybe I have an idea and I'll put some pieces in, and then it will turn into an event.
Yeah.
Or it'll go the other way where designers will be like, okay, in the case of Connor's thing, he was like, this concert, and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Like I
I'll find that
will
stuff.
make this happen.
Yeah.
Even if I had no pieces
Sure.
whatsoever. So it can work both ways. But because it was a GW1 location, I knew, okay, I was going to have, these certain points. What
Right.
they looked like 250 years later was essentially left up to me. I knew that Long Eyes Ledge, for example, was going to have to be destroyed enough that people wouldn't be, they'd understand why they couldn't use it.
Right.
So kind of like what does an avalanche look like in GW2, kind of became a discussion. And, but yeah, filling areas, like I don't even remember whether the farm was kind of my idea or whether that was earlier on.
The whole location?
Yeah, the whole,
I
I think we just kind of needed an area for retired Char. And I
Yeah.
was like, you know what, I have a lot of farm things, I was kind of,
I like the
how do I fill spaces?
I think I have an NPC there too. I think that's where I have the reputation because I always tell people no for their new features. No, go away. So I think the Grouchy Char is named after me.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's like Fangstorm or something like that. I don't know. They went back and forth. Yeah, I could be the Grouchy Char. I'm for it. It's cool.
I love it. Fangstorm.
Yeah, something like that.
It works.
Yeah, it's like Erasmus or something. I don't know. But yeah, this is an E-Fangstorm. Is like, crotchety old dude. But yeah, I really like the area.
Yeah, but so a lot of, and specifically if you're going back to GW1, I tried to be as faithful to the locations as I could. So here I call out to that shaman actually for his historical guide material. Like we do sit there sometimes and just like screen cap. I had the original dev version of GW1 open to me at the same time as I was trying to do like the height map of the new one and being like, okay, where does the ooze pit entrance, line up with the stream next to it?
Mm-hmm.
How far away is it from? And Doomlore, actually, that area caused me to kind of get a bunch of people in a room together and ask questions about the lore, because GW1, it's not always clear who had built what in terms of architecture. And so even when I was going through it, it looked like we had pieces of Cantha mixed in with like dwarven architecture. Well, it was particularly odd because the ooze pits too it looked human, but then it was tied to the Deldrimor like achievement chain and all kinds of weirdness. So I had to like get all the lore folks and be like, okay, what's human?
What's going on here?
What's
Yes.
well and
Sort this out for me.
and even then, the Cathedral of Flame was kind of, it was like maybe was originally human, but then the Flame Legion actually had the encampment on the outside. So should I still imply that what remains is human, or is it
Better
Char?
you than me, man. This sounds complicated.
Yeah, well, and
Sounds like concert
GW2 has far more distinct variations between what belongs to which race.
Sure.
So I didn't want to just throw in some dwarven architecture and then have wooden potatoes do a call out on me later.
Yeah.
so I wanted to be I wanted to be sure that I was using the right racial
Sure.
set.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird because in GW1, when you're actually in the open world map, you don't really see any of the architecture for some of these locations. It's just a tunnel in the ground. And I was like, this is the worst POI. So I kind of was like, okay, well, maybe, the ground settled and there's be a little bit kind of like poking up because they did have some spectacular, like Gothic cathedral, but almost all under the ground. So I was like, okay, what would poke through in 250 years of this, kind of that. And would any of the original Flame Legion camp even be there? And we kind of decided that no, because there were a few metal pieces, but at least from what you could see in GW1, a lot of it was just kind of leather and things that would have deteriorated. So
So probably not there.
probably not there. But yeah, so when you're building a map like that, and I think Justin had a ton of this too in a lot of the kind of Path of Fire and Living World stuff, where you're looking at both the client and people's screenshots, what they remember. You want to make sure to kind of include that again if you can.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think even the river is, I tried, besides where the dam is, which is funny because 250 years, the river of anything probably would have changed the most, but
a little.
but I liked, trying to use it as a good reference of okay, well, maybe they wouldn't have built the fort on top of where the river was originally. And, just even looking at that kind of stuff, and trying to not completely make our poor UI artists redo the overworld map by putting, the crater in different locations. So that kind of thing is important too. They do have the blue versus the green color on the overworld that we try to pay a little attention to.
A little bit.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a much more specific question now. And this is something that I've seen a lot of good feedback about. Will you continue to use the event schedule boards in future episodes? And if so, will we get an option in the in-game clock to show Tyrion time?
So,
Eric.
I this morning even have literally
just overheard this conversation.
Yes, I love
behind me
this.
in the
running
hall.
around the office.
So excited for this question.
Yeah, I can't commit to things 100% because there's processes, and we can't upset the apple cart for something smallish. But I am personally working on getting y'all some answers, some better way to know what time it is, so that you can make it to the events and not be late for the concert. I watched a couple streams where they were actually in your jumping puzzle, and they're like, I don't want to leave. The concert's starting soon. Yeah, but I'm close. And so
as soon as you leave, then all of the lights, all your checkpoint lights turn off.
Yeah.
No.
So I wanted and so
Tracy, no.
they stayed and they got there in time for Pyrotoric.
Okay.
So whatever. And it'll come again. That's fine. But tools to know what time it is. I've been doing a lot of digging and stuff this morning, and we don't want to commit to anything in particular, but I think we'll have some good answers. Yeah.
Awesome.
I do going forward. I don't know if we're going to do a very time-specific map, but I like the idea, and I've seen good feedback on the event board being in the game. You can see it.
Well, and there's kind of nice timing in between if going by Tyria time, too. It just kind of worked out nicely where you have downtime of, 10, 15 minutes, just kind of run around and explore, and then...
And there's an event.
Yeah, rather than, I think, a lot of the time we have, 2-hour spans, which is a little problematic if people are kind of playing a little more casually, so...
Well, we did, we diegetically got a map-wide notification. You have all the Chargo somewhere, and there's on the mega or the announcement system you get to hear about it. So I think that helps really drive. Plus the concert's just awesome. I didn't say that.
Right.
We can talk about that next week.
The concert is awesome, though.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
You're allowed to talk about it.
Fair enough.
All right, let's see. How about the use of camera tricks rather than pure cutscenes was new? Is that something we'll see more of going forward?
Oh, that's almost more of a Kirk question.
Kirk and Connor, there was a little bit of new tech for it. So in the last banger speech, we're assuming people have played, right? So I don't.
Yeah.
We're
Spoil
spoiling.
so.
Yes,
We've
if
been
you're watching
doing
this, you're
tons of
going to be
spoilers.
spoiled.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's not a big
It's
spoiler,
okay.
but he's up on the mountain. That one. If you notice, there's twice that we take control of your camera, which we don't usually like to do, but we wanted to help sell a really cinematic moment in a way that didn't involve a full cutscene. We also have full cutscenes, especially the one that's awesome in Banger's office. But that's not what I'm
so
talking
good.
about. I had nothing to do with that. No credit to me for that. Nope.
Good news, the people who did are coming.
Yeah, Kirk and Connor. I think Connor did the one in the first chapter, where you sit and watch the Devourer fight, and we zoom in on Banger.
Yeah,
and
Banger has this little speech
because
there.
otherwise he just kind of sat out in the distance and whatever. So Kirk was going to do something similar at the end, where we wanted to see Bangar, but it was important to get the dialogue so that the player could see it. And we've taken control of the camera and really highlight it. Well, the speech bubbles aren't visible, right? You can't see. He's way off in the distance, and he's not even in frame if the timing doesn't work out right. So we needed a way to put them on the screen somewhere else. So I just made the tech, altered the tech we hijacked something else. There's this announcement tech for when you need to say I think we use it in PvP and stuff to say some point has been captured or something. We just wanted to move it down and append the name of the speaker. So I added those things and we tried it. And it was actually that reads really well. It's not. We haven't established this as a visual cue for this is dialogue, but people got it right away. So our UI people yeah, looks great. Okay, so now it's a new tool. We added some stuff in the back end so that if they need to do that going forward, they can. We want to use it sparingly because this is not This is not like a movie game. Some games are like that, where it's all about you're just kind of there to watch a movie, and it's okay when the camera goes away. We want to try to get that in part through other means, where we sort of encourage the player. It's like when I play Vista, I actually, like the Overlook one, I pushed it as far away as I could, so I could try to make sure you were in the right spot. So when the camera came in behind you, stuff like that are little tricks to kind of guide your eye. But every once in a while, we want to take control, and this one gives us a way to do that. So I hope so. I can't guarantee, but I know that other teams are like, so what did you add? Just asking for a friend here.
A friend who's going to absolutely borrow
may
that.
steal it immediately. Yeah, so we'll see. I can't guarantee anything because I don't know what they're up to, but I'm sure I'll find out.
Don't tell them to go away when they come to tell you.
Go away. I'm a crotchety old charman.
Get off your dog.
All right, let's do one more. What does the map design workflow look like? This is kind of a Tracy question, I think. How do you go about designing and making maps, and does the story affect that process?
The story definitely affects that process.
Just putting things in the map, going, deal with it.
Sometimes we want to say that, depending how far along it is. But yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, we tend to start with a vague idea of important locations in a map first, and we usually know how big it's going to be. So if I refer to chunks, it's because that's actually how we keep track of the dimensions.
Right.
So mine's 500, which is about the same size as Queensdale, for reference. So I knew vaguely that much, and I kind of have to take a few chunks off the edge to build up, various walls and whatnot. So I kind of, put vague, like, okay, I know that Doomlore is going to be X size. I know that the fort's going to be so big. And then I kind of go through, my initial pass tends to do kind of deal with heights and so on. And and my designers get to laugh because I tend to go through a phase where I'm just painting lines onto the ground.
I was gonna say, isn't that because you draw
for the
on
longest
ground.
time, our keep pretty much just had a bunch of squares that just said Farrar.
Yeah,
just written into the ground.
Well, when you run along, you can't really see it, but then the overmap, it's like somebody painted from with a paint cannon from a helicopter. And Farrar.
Yeah, that's
It always catches me off. And there'll be some areas that are much more done, and then you go to Farrar MS Paintland. And I guess I can imagine this later.
Okay, if anybody has a screenshot of that, I need
just
to
thought of that.
so
Yeah, I don't think I do,
but
but
well, we might
We should
because
save them
I
next
had
time.
to. I had to
next
check
time
in.
save them.
I'm sure they do in Perforce because
you could
hooked
probably
up
dig
to the
them up.
mini maps. You could probably look at the older version of our mini map Perforce file, and it probably will just have the keep with its ceiling removed, so that I could be like, okay. We do go through a phase where it's like, is this room big enough?
Right.
What happened? What needs to happen here? Does this room need to hold 5 NPCs, or is it a broom closet that's supposed to be kind of just hiding an achievement coin or something? And so there is, because we know that there's going to be a bit of back and forth in areas like that. There is kind of a gray box stage where the walls and stuff are kind of temporary, and we even have a prop set that's just gray for that purpose to indicate that, hey, this is in process. If you need me to move a wall, I haven't really spent a whole lot of time making this pretty, so now's your chance to let me know.
If it's beautiful, leave me alone.
And that's how it honestly kind of works. Is things, especially like towns and cities and things where the potential that it's going to move around for NPCs or for story is a lot higher. Those tend to stay as kind of temp props for the longest, and then. But in terms of the height and the roads and stuff, those get put in pretty early so that we can get feedback of, oh my goodness, these things need to be closer together or whatever. That needs to happen a lot sooner in the process. And then areas that I know that are pretty much just make it pretty directions. The farm happened really quick.
You're like, all right, challenge accepted.
Well, all I knew was that there was going to be a grumpy char in the corner. So I was like, okay, well,
better make it pretty.
I'll leave aside some areas for his pretty lush green lawn.
Sure.
But other than that, I could actually just go in myself and just be like, okay, I will just fill the space and kind of put my headphones on and nobody talk to me and come back when you need to know where the various resource nodes should go and stuff like that, or where we might put a vista. So that kind of happens separately, and then story comes through, and then we kind of have to. That tends to get a lot more set dressing kind of modifications and lighting modifications the farther we go. But yeah, once the ground train's kind of set, then I go through and I put in the bigger pieces, so like the rock cladding, some of the bigger trees, any fence work and stuff that gets put in real early, so that Lath from QA2 can tell me, be like, this is probably a bad location for a fence because the NPCs keep getting caught.
Yeah.
Things like that can get caught earlier on.
Yeah.
So the bigger pieces go in, and then if everybody's kind of okay with the area and there's no like, oh my gosh, in the future I plan to put XYZ here, emergencies, then I go through and then that's when set dressing gets added. So that's like the smaller things of like, oh, okay, maybe there's like a little well here and there's buckets, and that's kind of towards the end. And then very last tends to be the lighting stuff.
And removing like 2 strawberry bushes so I can put them in the farm.
Yeah, that stuff happens towards the end.
Pluck, pluck. Thanks, Tracy. That'll fit.
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned before NavMesh too, like a lot of the things that the designers will be adding, like the resource nodes and so on, those kind of come in towards the end. And so there's like, I would like this ledge to, can I please put, a hidden chest on this ledge, and I could be like, okay. And I just like put a little flood point there.
Because usually it's like, make do with the space you've got, find good spots. But every once in a while, I was like, this is so cool, but it doesn't have the the techie part of it is not set up so that it can spawn a thing. So I make a big list of those and give them to you, and you like said yes to all of them.
Well, it's fast to do certain things and not so fast to do others.
It was awesome.
Yeah, and that's when we add like the extra touches, like, oh, it'd be cool if this blizzard got more intense, or
polished stuff,
or like, okay, we want the narratively, we'd like the party to get a little more out of hand, so maybe there's some more things that like break, maybe some of the various posters get a little shredded, smoke happen, like
good
those
stuff.
Those things kind of get tweaked towards
always,
the very
yeah.
end. But yeah, that's the general flow.
There you go. Now we're all map artists.
Now you're all map artists.
No. We are not. I'm not. You might
No,
be.
not even close. Angry
All
Trotter.
right.
We went over this.
Well, thank you both very much. I hear audio and cinematic guys like milling around out in the hallway. So
All right.
thank you all. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you all for hanging out with us. Stick around because we have one more set of dev guests, and I will let you guys get back to work. Thank you for answering all our questions.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
All right. See you soon. All right, welcome back, and thank you all for your patience in waiting your turn. Why don't we jump right on in, and I'll have each of you introduce yourself and talk about what you worked on for Bound by Blood.
I'm Greg. I'm a cinematics artist. Worked on the cinematic for the prologue. It was a lot of fun.
And that is in Bangar's office.
Yes,
that
Bangar's
one.
office, the Bangar Ritlock fight. So
Yeah.
spoilers. I'm assuming that's already been said.
Yes, we're spoiling
Far into
everything.
it,
We're
yes.
assuming that if you're watching this show,
Yeah.
you have played through and you've seen everything. So
Yes.
let fly.
Yeah.
All right, Jason.
My name is Jason Byfield. I did the trailer for Bound by Blood.
Yay.
The launch trailer. That's where it's at.
My name is Chris Burgess, and I am a sound designer here at ArenaNet, and I did all the sound effects for Greg's cinematic and
Sounds awesome.
Yeah,
thanks,
as
Greg.
usual.
And some open world work, some story stuff, sound effects, and did some help with music coordinating for the overall tone of the episode. Yeah.
That was probably a lot of fun for this particular episode.
Well, I was not involved with the concert.
You didn't. That's.
I was involved with
Joe.
everything that happened in the story, but not the concert itself. I kind of y'all talk about that later, but
I am so excited for that episode.
Some of the other audio people were really into this, and I don't know anything about metal music, and they were asking me, like, we need to get your opinion. I was like, you really don't want my opinion. I don't know anything about this stuff. So, but what they came up with, I'm just blown away by, and I'm so proud of them.
I'm stuck on the part where you don't know anything about metal music because that's actually legitimately surprising to me. It's not a character judgment. It's just
there's so many subgenres. Let's put it that way. There
Okay.
are heavier genres of music I'll listen to, but metal is just not one I know a lot about. So when you
enough.
come to the aficionados of all those little metal subgenres, it's not my scene. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the cinematic in Bangar's office, we saw a little teaser of way
Yeah.
back on August 30th. There was a lot. How did you decide what was going to go into that? And I know it was not just your decision, but
yeah, for sure. I mean, marketing plays a big part in that of what they want to show, and we try to work with them on what we think is the right amount, not giving too much away, that sort of thing. But we want to also show something that's that's cool and gets fans excited. So I think it did that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually remember we only showed part of that, and I remember the conversations about we don't want to spoil people, but we want to make it good.
Yeah.
What do we do? And there were so many conversations about because the whole thing was so good, like every little beat of that really flowed well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a good one for sure.
I was actually in the marketing meeting. We were discussing like where that cut should happen, and I know there was a lot of back and forth, like exactly how much of each
what
shot should be
and-
included.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's
So, what was your favorite part about working on that? What was the most fun thing to get in there?
Man, I think, I mean, at the start it was kind of daunting because it's like, oh my gosh, we have to make these char emote, and that sounds like that could be really hard
It's
with
cat
their
drama.
faces. Exactly, yeah. And so I think to get it to the point where we did with the faces, Bangar in particular, and the emotion that we got out of it is really cool. I mean, doing a fight like as an animator, that's a lot of fun. But I think the fact that we could get all that emotion out of them was probably my favorite thing. So
That's right. The fight there was a lot going on in there. And I feel like maybe I'm a little bit biased because I've watched it like 900 times since August. But was that difficult getting everything just right in that fight? Because their armor's big.
Oh yeah, I mean obviously armor's always a problem, but yeah, I mean we did lots of iterations of the fight. I think we have an old one of the first versions of it and stuff,
Oh,
and
that's
so we work with mocap actors. Actually, Jason was the mocap actor for Bangar.
Were you really?
Yep.
Yeah, you did an awesome job, right?
First
That's
time in mocap.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. And so, but we're obviously we are not professionals.
Yeah.
We hand-to-hand combat and stuff, and so kind of figuring out the fight scene and how to do that and make it work. And like you said, with the armor and all that, it takes a lot of troubleshooting.
It's being very modest. It's definitely professionals here.
And hand-to-hand combat?
At the okay.
Yeah, that's.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
I know. I was like, tell me more. This
No,
is suddenly
no.
fascinating.
The other guy that was in that scene that was playing Whitlock was Ron Harvey, and he actually punched me a few times accidentally. So
Oh no, are you serious?
not hard or anything like
Yeah.
that, but it was definitely we were he and I've known him for a long time, and so he and I were actually like really getting physical with each other and trying to make it seem as realistic as possible.
He actually does like do something.
Yeah,
doesn't
he does some
like,
stuff like, in his free time, just like that's for like fitness and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
I guess I shouldn't say we weren't professionals. We had one guy who kind of knew.
Yeah.
And that's how Jason got punched.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
I forgot we had the preface. So do you want to look at that, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about how the process goes?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are Metal Legion! We're here to put the band back.
Hold on, I need a second.
That's okay. Mark's looking for it. You got a preview of what to see. So while Mark's getting that, though, let's talk a little bit about what goes into that, because that's you guys will see in a second. That's not even close to the finished product.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so narrative, and Novera was in here earlier, and she had a large hand in writing the script, and so they give us the script, and so then we start kind of just walking through it. We do maybe some storyboards or run through it. I remember there was one night where I just like had kind of in my head what I thought this fight should be, and it was, doing all these different moves and stuff. Thought, okay, we have it down. We kind of show everyone. And the narrative was like, that's cool, but we want it to be more nuanced. It's not all about the fight. The fight is only a portion of it, right? And so then, we go back to the drawing board and do some more mocap. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of working with narrative, working with the other team members also with it that are, making the map and the props and all that stuff of what they can do and how they can help us and shots that we can do because of that and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a lot of collaboration for sure.
yeah, it sounds like it. So, and yeah, the fight is something that we've been focusing on, but there are a lot of bombshells dropped in here too. And again, all of those little nuanced things, like you've got Krisha in the background, kind of like, okay, this is getting interesting.
Yeah, for sure. That was something that again, like we had Krisha kind of doing in our minds a little bit different thing, and narrative was like, well, she's not sure kind of where she stands, and she knows Ritlock and she knows Bangar, and so this tension of what does she think about all this and stuff. So yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the early version.
You narrow-minded, nearsighted old man. How we followed you for so long. You may look like a jarred boy, but you damn well don't have the heart or the spine. Is that the best you've got, boy? You walk away from me, and you walk away from the jar.
Your knees, sir. You can't lead us from that position.
I'm sorry we didn't warn you about that. that was very echoey and clingy, and it sounds like maybe it happened in the mocap room.
Yeah, it definitely did. We went down there to just try and kind of figure it out, plan it out, and so yeah, it's just Ron and Jason talking in the mocap room basically. So luckily
good.
Chris came in
thanks.
and
I
helped us
appreciate
out
that.
a lot.
Yeah.
So
But this is a lot different from the final product.
Yeah.
So you do that, you get it in front of narrative,
Mhm.
and then narrative says, okay, but what if we did all of these different things?
Yeah, and not like I said, not just narrative. I mean, we have a stakeholder meeting with most of the leads and stuff, and so everyone is contributing. And I remember Chuck, who's the animation lead, specifically was like, this fight is cool, but they kind of look like they're people in cat suits basically, and they need to kind of be more Char-like and stuff. And so we get feedback from all over the place, and the obviously, as you saw, like that was very rough, and compared to what the final product is, like all that feedback makes it what it is. So.
Yeah, and it seems it is very rough, but it seems from an outside perspective like it's much more efficient than putting a ton of work into it.
Oh yeah.
Getting something that's kind of at least semi-pretty and polished, and then being told, actually, we're going to go a slightly different route on these beats.
Totally. Yeah, that's like the worst is you get down the road and then it's like, oh, actually we need to, do something different. And it's like, well, you can't easily, do that. You have to do a 180 basically. So whenever we can get that taken care of early on, that's much better for sure.
Yeah.
But we're probably a little more flexible than your average studio just due to the fact that we have a mocap stage.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, a lot of studios, like, they might have to go down to, like, LA or where one of their mocap, vendors are, and so it makes it a lot more difficult for them to kind of switch gears.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. For us, it's like, hey, Jason, we want to go reshoot this thing. We got some feedback, right? And so it's just based on our schedules, which is really nice. So.
Yeah, that is. I didn't think about that. That's really, really handy having that here.
Yeah, for sure. We like it a lot.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the Bound by Blood trailer because
Sure.
that was incredibly fun.
Yeah, I had a really fun time working on this one. I mean, I have fun on all of them, but this one in particular, my process is typically when I am starting to work on a trailer is I'll go through and play the episode, just where it's at that moment. And as soon as I got to the concert, I knew, like, this is going to be the thread that ties this trailer together. Connor like everyone who worked on that did an amazing job. And so when I got to that portion, I normally don't capture a bunch of footage right off the bat. I'll play through the episode and then kind of will structure an edit based on audio and based on the needs for features and that kind of thing. And in this one, as soon as I started the concert, I was like, okay, I got into the game, started capturing footage, and disassembled a really rough kind of take on how this should look. And presented that to the people, like leads and people who would be involved, and everybody got it right away, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, something that you mentioned to me was that you thought of this from the perspective of I am shooting a rock concert.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I'd always kind of wanted to do like a music video approach to one of our trailers, and this was the opportunity to do that. And so, yeah, I was, how would I shoot, if I were in charge of, running a switchboard, let's say, at a concert, like, how would I shoot this? And that's pretty much what that was. So it was, I mean, there was no, for the concert itself, there's no custom animations that we're using. And so what was built in is exactly what was presented in the trailer, which was, like, pretty amazing, considering, like, I've got an extended, section of guitar solo that doesn't, it's hard for me at least to see that there's a looping animation going on during that. So it worked out really well. And I think we've got an early cut of that.
Yeah, do we want to look at that early cut? Okay.
We are Metal Legion! We're here to put the band back in warband! Commander! Hey! It's Bram! I have hair again! Hela! First warband, Tulastan, Fort Claws Veins, bound by blood. Shoulder to shoulder, steady in rights, bound by blood. We attack, we bleed, no retreat, no defeat, bound by blood. This is our mission, our war, we are pure. We are one legion, united, bound by blood, we are sure. Legion, united, bound by blood. Legion, united, bound by blood. Oh, you ain't heard nothing yet? We're just getting started. Be proud, Char forever.
It's a rough asset. So yeah, lots of rough assets in there. You can see that's actually a fairly early edit. The fire was that was the first time I had presented the fire at the end, and people it got a good laugh, and so we ended up continuing with it. It was never meant to be a permanent thing. It was just like a fun little thing to stub at the end for our reviews. But yeah, you can see there's a lot of temp assets, a lot of shots that were slightly different, but the overall structure is pretty much the same. It just happened to come together really easily. So
Yeah, the fire at the end being just like, oh, haha, and it ended up staying.
Yeah, it was kind of initially it was like you said, very like haha funny moment.
Yeah.
And then when we started thinking about it, like, it needed something to kind of message to the audience that this is all kind of tongue in cheek, and this is all it's a fun piece, not necessarily meant to be taken too seriously.
Yeah.
And it's kind of indicating that to the audience that this is our take on an 80s kind of metal type concert video. So
heck yeah.
we saw Bram, like Bram was swapped in for Anja for the rock on emote. So we made a few changes just based on the needs after showcasing that to specific people in the studio.
So this is our introduction to Anja too.
Yeah. So we snuck her into the Dragon Bash release, which some people caught on.
I think some people saw that.
Yeah, for sure. There were threads that were going around about who this character was, because it's not. I mean, if there's a named character, usually there's some significance there, and
there's
we didn't release any
yeah.
information about who she was, and so. What we were trying to do there was have Anja and Duncan, who was the season 4 player character. It was basically like a handoff, like a baton handoff. And so then for this trailer, we didn't initially have like an introduction to her. It was just kind of supposed to be like, oh, hopefully they'll understand that this is the commander. And I wanted to have a little more direct, like, no, I want to signify that this is the commander for the season. And so that's why there's that Bram section where he's talking about his hair. It's not about that. It's about him walking in and saying, "Hey, commander!" Like, yeah, this is the commander for the season. Yeah. So that's how that section kind of came about. Yeah. And then I had at one point after this edit, I had extended the feature section to kind of fit more content in. And in order to do that, I had to take the song and kind of loop a few portions of it, and I was feeling that. And I could tell it in the edit. I'm like, this is getting repetitive. I can feel I didn't like the way that it was feeling, and so I went to Chris and was basically, hey, this song is getting repetitive to me. Is there anything in the song that you can think of to pull out that would help? And instead of doing that, what he suggested is that we actually kind of remove ourselves from the music for a little while, and that's how the Goric section came about in the final episode, in the final trailer.
That was fantastic.
So it's a way for us to kind of remove ourselves from that moment for a section, and also introduce a character, and that was all suggested by Chris. So.
It's just a big crutch to get me out of trouble. Because you were like, how can we make this less repetitive? And I was like, I don't think we can.
Yeah.
And I said, so we need a smoke screen. I said, what's Gork doing?
Yep. And in the episode,
he's angry in the basement.
Yeah. And
in the episode, he's stuck in this room, being held captive, and so. And I wanted to introduce more of the characters that were going to be shown in the episode. Yeah. And so it just kind of fell together. I was like, that is perfect. Here's what we'll do. He's annoyed. He's doing something. He's annoyed by this music that it's rattling through his area, and so that's how that came about.
And I was worried about that. I mean, I knew we had signed off on it, but we had a company meeting where I think we showed it on release day or right before it, and people started cracking up at that scene, and I was like, okay, it worked.
Success.
Yeah.
So I do remember it took a little while to dial in exactly how that should sound.
Yeah, we really wanted to hear. I said, I really want to hear that upstairs neighbor, just.
Yes.
So that was fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in that meeting, and that was one of the highlights of showing that trailer. Everybody got such a kick out of, and just that little head shake when he went back to the
Yep.
It's so good.
That was you did that. Greg put that together.
That was you?
Yeah.
That was awesome. That was just a touch I really liked, where he's got that exasperation, but he's not like banging a broom on the ceiling and screaming.
That's what we were going for.
Yep. Exactly what we were going for. So success.
And that is, if I haven't said it, a big thank you to the cinematics team, because you came to me to solve an audio problem. And I basically said, can we do this other thing? But if it creates work, don't do it. And you were like, well, let's try it.
Yeah.
And then oh, well, it needs an animation. I'm like, no, I don't want to create work. And then Greg just did the head shake. And so y'all really stepped up. And
that was
last minute.
An extra ask, because our animation budget was already pretty tight. And so when I suggested maybe we'd touch this, and it was what we ended up starting with was some existing animation loops that we had. And then Greg went and finessed it and did a custom version on top of that. And so it worked out really nicely and didn't eat up a bunch of your time, and it fixed a problem that existed that we wanted to make sure that we weren't getting too repetitive. So.
Something I found with the people that work here, because everybody is so into what they're doing, that if there's a good idea and you're like, no, I don't want to create work. If it's a good idea, you're going to find yourself running behind them going, please stop. I said I didn't want to create work. And they're like, no, this is great.
Yeah. I agree. I've definitely seen that firsthand multiple times, and I'm guilty of doing that sometimes as well. It's like, I don't really have the time, but I really want to get this done.
Yeah, like this is super exciting, so let's make it happen.
Yeah.
So huge thanks to you guys, because it was very good. Speaking of the new commander, and that was one in the trailer that we used mocap for, right? We had mocap on 4 of them.
Yes. So for the reveal for Anja and the Bram hair thing, those 2 characters have mocap on them. And then Marjorie and Casimir, we did a kind of imposed, like a mocap pose for them with some slight hand king on top of that that Dahi worked on. And then so that was the mocap that we did for that episode, which we weren't initially planning on do, but I think we were actually. We'll be downstairs capturing mocap for something else, and then we were like, okay, well, we have some time. Let's grab this while we're here. Yeah. So that worked out really well. And the trailer that we saw just now has that basic rough mocap. It's had a little bit of polish on it, but not much. Bram's got the blade hands and he's pointing his hair like this. There's no finger poses or anything like that. So.
I liked that little nuance pose of Kaz and Marjorie just kind of sitting there leaning against the stage. You could tell that they weren't really into this.
Yeah. And that took a lot of, surprisingly, for such a simple, it appears to be a simple thing, that actually took a lot of time to dial in and a lot of feedback from people, because we wanted to really kind of get into their, even though it looks like they're just kind of leaning, we really wanted to get some nuance in there as far as how they were feeling at that moment. Like if you look at Casimir, like she's not super celebratory because, she's going through a lot right now with the previous season. And then Marjorie, we're starting to kind of open her up a little bit. She's got the foot tap and the head bob kind of going on during the music. So it surprisingly, even though it does look like there's not much going on there was a lot of thought put into that. So, and then with the final trailer, we've got the commander, she's enjoying the concert. So
the commander is
she's showing off the emote. So.
She's very happy to have unlocked her emote.
Yes.
That is a whole thing that worked out really well.
Yeah.
So that was just mocap that you captured while you were down there doing something else.
Yeah, it was. We knew we were gonna be down on the mocap stage, and we had these moments that initially we were just thinking we would do either hand key or simple poses on, and then while we were down there, we were like, we might as well capture it, and then Greg and Dahi were able to utilize that. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, how about what were some of the most fun things to work on from an audio perspective in this episode?
The trailer specifically was licensed to basically indulge myself in all my worst what's the phrase I'm looking for, impulses sonically. If you watch, I feel like every time I come on here I have to reference Stranger Things, but their sound people have so much fun because everything that happens, somebody reaches down and grabs a thing and it's this crazy thing, and I said nobody gets away with that, and as soon as this sort of became a tongue-in-cheek trailer, I got on our audio channel and I said, do we have, I don't want to mention the library by name, but there's a sound library that's just really, really overused. And I said, do we have this library? And the audio team was like, banned, get Chris out, because we don't want anybody using these sounds. No, I need I wouldn't say bad sounds, but extremely overused sounds, because it's there's, when you hear a clay pot break, there's a sound of a clay pot breaking, then there's the clay pot break.
I can hear it in my head.
Yeah, exactly. And so when the fire explosion happens at the end of the trailer and when the Live Now thing comes down, we were like, I need the metal hit, from a monster truck rally and
that clang.
Yeah. So those are nerdy moments for me. The cinematic, I really obsessed over and had a lot of fun with because I feel like the writing for this episode and how character-driven it is, and just Bengar, when I got introduced to that character, I just became obsessed with every part of this character needs to feel imposing, and he's this great military person, but he's being, spoilers, manipulative, and everything he makes personal. I said, everything this guy does is just, bad to the bone. So in that cinematic, I was probably driving Greg nuts talking about it. I was listening to, because originally they were sort of like running into each other, and I said, I want these guys to sound like cars hitting each other, and I was looking up the sound of a junkyard when they were dropping like mini Coopers on each other, and I was sending them files like, this is what they should sound like. And then it turned into they were punching, and I was at a street fair one day, and there was a antique shop or booth, and most of it was very touristy stuff, not true antiquing. About to show my antique snobbiness here, but they had this water pump, this really thick metal water pump, and I just was like picking it up and moving it and sort of jingling it, and I was like, I don't know, this is something. And I brought it back, and I think that was before the cinematic, before we started working on it. I just bought that because I was like, this is fun. We'll do something with this. And so we started the cinematic, and I wanted his armor. It was really difficult. Sorry, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole. It was very difficult to make his armor sound how I wanted, because I wanted it to sound chunky, but I wanted it to sound very finely crafted. All pieces that fold and move together. It couldn't just be clunk, clunk, clunk.
Right.
So, and finding metal objects that do that have a weight to them, because you can find a lot of little ticky, tick, 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 tick things, but I need him to sound just like a tank. So I got that water pump out, and I was clanking on it, and everything was ting, 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 ting. Wasn't working. And we have a car hood in our Foley room that I said, let's try that. Actually, that's not true. I tried about 10, 15 things. I was putting it on file cabinets. I was putting it on this and that and the other. It wasn't working. And Joe Clark one morning saw me pulling my hair out, and I said, Joe, what do I do? What do I do to make this guy sound big? And he said, well, let's get the car hood out, and we did that. And it's amazing what happens when if you have something that makes a sound, and you put it on something, especially something that resonates, something that's wooden or has a cavity in it, it just totally changes the presence of the sound. And so when we put that water pump on a car hood, it still had all the water pump had a nice mechanism to it. It sounded like a complex machine, but putting it on the car hood, when those two conduct and resonate, it gave it a weight that I instantly was just like, this is our guy, everything he does. And the second part of that, which we have a behind the scenes video for that, but the second part of that was everything's about perspective and contrast. If you have big sounds and other big sounds playing, it might not sound big because there's no perspective. And I said, with Ritlock, we kind of need to make him sound small to make Bengar sound big. And that was mentally, I don't know if I said that out loud to you guys, but it weirded me out because I was like, Ritlock's, he's crazy. He's crazy, not a small guy. So I was a little worried that somebody would call that out, and I don't think anybody ever did. But his armor, it wasn't puny, but it was just light. It was not in your face. And Bengar's, I feel like it's still subtle, but if you listen, he's really he's heavy. He's a heavyweight. And then there's the punches, which was also fun because we went to the store and got vegetables, we got chicken, we got peanuts, pasta. And we had a day where we punched it, we hit it with a baseball bat, we threw it around. I mean, we did everything. And then we ingested all that into our, no pun intended, sorry.
Sir, are you okay?
We did not ingest.
We ingested all that
Then we ate
into
it.
our sound station. And then I really wanted to also look at some of the classic films. Actually, I was not looking at the classic films. I was looking at Ben Burt, who's sort of one of the godfathers of sound design, who, when he did Indiana Jones, he was looking at classic film sound and trying to mimic how do you make those old school punch sounds. And the idea was that they were recording on wire, wire recorders. And when you blow out the signal, when you distort with digital technology today, it sounds terrible. It's but when you distort it on old analog tape, it just sort of like squished the sound to be this big thing. So we really tried to play with elements that would mimic some of those old school punches and just make it really beefy. And if I stop talking here, we have a video. Sorry, it was a long process, and I was coming into work saying to Greg, like, I was dreaming about it, like how we're gonna make this sound and make Bengar sound heavy.
Yeah, it was pretty cool because I mean I was very excited about the cinematic, but then to see Chris coming in, he was also he's like, I can't wait to work on this, and I went and picked this up today, and so it was cool to. Yeah, just see the passion.
I did. I came over there with the chicken. I was like, hey, this is about to be Bengar's face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at the behind the scenes video.
Yeah.
I'm here now.
Ew.
Yes.
It's pretty good.
We had a lot of fun.
So
Yeah.
what's the viewers couldn't hear us talking. What was in the blue bag?
That I call the meat bag. That had everything in it because Greg was there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. We were just like adding things to the pile. We're like, let's beat up the chicken. All right, now get the cabbage. Now do this, and then like we had kind of just eviscerated it to this pile of mush.
Ew.
And I said, all right, let's wrap that all up in a towel, because sometimes what happens is when you're working with a prop, like let's say a vegetable, for instance, it's very bright, it's very crackly, but sometimes what's grosser to me is if you can hear it like under the skin. So I wanted to go for people are gonna think I'm this is like somebody's gonna report me for being an insane person. But I was like, well, I kind of want to hear what it sounds like underneath the skin. So let's wrap it up in a bag, a towel. And I went to the store that day. I said, we're buying a towel and we're throwing this towel away after this because it was just soaked, and I did not want to put it in a washing machine. And so that became the meat bag, which kind of had these nice, whatever fleshy association you want to make getting hit. So
Uncooked pasta, peanuts.
And it was great because we'd hit it a few
just,
times, and then you just sort of massage it, and the next time maybe some peanuts would be on top, so you get a crunchy one, then you get a wet one.
Our jobs are weird.
I'm
fun.
Yes, in the best way. It's my constant refrain is our jobs are weird.
Yeah.
I've told this Chris before. I said if I didn't get into video editing, I would totally have been a sound designer because this sounds like so much fun.
Right? You guys have all the fun stuff.
Well, that's not our full-time job. We do other things.
Just sitting there crunching cabbage.
We don't record ourselves on the computer just doing stuff. But yes, when we get to cut loose, it's pretty great. And we have a great team within the audio team, and Greg and Emilio, the former audio and cinematics producer, was there. We try and rope people in and say like, hey, let's have some fun. Let's make some weird sounds. Yeah.
All right. Well, do you guys want to answer a few questions from viewers?
Sure.
Okay. We're running so long right now. This has been an insanely long show. So I'm gonna grab a couple of these, and then if you guys watching have questions, we'll have time for maybe one or two. All right. Was it fun? This was a question for narrative too, but you guys called that out as well. Was it fun to create Krisha and Bengar? They're both imposing and feel living. And face punched, apparently.
I mean, I think that's, for me, what we just talked about. I wanted to go to this really insane level of, not necessarily detail, but just I wanted them to feel with their sound very real, very alive. And Krisha has a lot of quiet movement sounds in that cinematic, but they're there, and that was all Foleyed to picture. So
Foley to picture.
Foley, capital F, because it was a person's name, Jack Foley. F-O-L, don't laugh. I get on rants about this. F-O-L-E-Y. And it is the act of recording sounds while watching the picture. So, I would watch Krisha, and she's kind of folding her arms and doing her thing, and I had on a couple different types of jackets and gloves and was moving around. And in the same ways that in the past we've talked about how mocap versus hand key may be more efficient, sometimes it's faster to Foley a character doing this rather than for me to sit there and say, well, I got a little bit of cloth of sound and a little cloth sound, and now I got to edit them and put them together. It's like, well, I can just go do the thing in about 5 minutes and we're done. So, yeah, it's great for character movements.
Yeah, and I think it was, like we had talked about, it was a process to figure out who those characters were, and I don't think Bengar, you could, obviously it wasn't finished, but the first thing we showed, like, I don't feel like Bengar was anywhere near as imposing or menacing as he was in the final version, and to get that nuance with him, it was a lot of fun to work with narrative and everything to figure out who he was, and Krisha also, I think she's still a mystery to a degree, but that was kind of what we wanted for this episode also. So I think both of them were a lot of fun to work on for sure.
And our boss, Chelsea Shooter, like she was down there while we were doing mocap for the cinematic, and she was going into a lot of, like, with me, because I was Bengar for the mocap, about just drawing from I have a military background, and he's the Chara military race, and he's the leader of this particular faction, and so I had to draw a lot from just my experience with some people, and so I had a couple people in mind that I just had interacted with while I was in the military for that were I'm emulating those people while playing Bengar is very much. Just kind of looking, like, for the most part, looking down their nose at people and looking down. So at the end of that cinematic, when Bengar is standing tall and kind of watching Krisha walk away, it was just very much like looking down my nose at, like, what is going on here? So, but I drew a lot from that for that particular character.
Yeah,
so.
That's very. And I think it's no accident that I think that the cinematic came out so well. Everything I do, I compare to Joko is one of the favorite ones that I have worked on, and I think that both of those cinematics have writing for villains that are just really well done. There's nuance with them. They aren't they aren't just your straight bad guy necessarily, right? And they have emotion and character, and so. I think it's no accident that those are. I think a couple of the best cinematics.
You don't think
the writing is great, so.
Bengar's not going to be tying anybody up on the railroad track.
No mustache twirling.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
All right, I have one more for you guys. Good job on creating a slowly building sense of menace toward the end that felt much more real and ugly than, hey, cartoonish villainy we've faced so far. The railroad track.
Yeah.
So how far do you think you can push that before it starts to clash with the overall heroic fantasy feel of the game? I got your whole question in there.
I called that one out specifically for the music direction, because we took a look at, honestly, where we're going and then at this episode, and spoiler for the episode, when you get to that last mountaintop thing, like, we knew that's the moment when, if I was marching up that mountain as the commander, the situation it's reeling, it's out of control, we can't get there fast enough, and when we see what's happening, it's just like, oh,
darn,
thank you. That's the word I was searching for.
It's like, Chris is trying not to swear.
Everything we were wrong, everything we didn't want to have happen, like, this is really bad. And we started from there and then worked backwards and said, how do we want to pace out the layers of the onion and pulling back those layers? Because in Greg's scene, like, we were very worried. We did not want it to feel so ominous that you're like, bad guy. Like, it had to be, well, we don't know how we feel. And I'm just going to call out the great work that we worked with. Stan Lepard, McLean Deemer, and Brendan Williams all contributed music to this episode. And they did a great job following the direction, which was this really, like, in a past life of being a musician, the band vamps for a while. It's like we're letting it cook, and I feel like these guys did a really good job of just letting it cook at the perfect rate so that when you get to that ending, I mean, it is the culmination of all the disciplines that worked on episode 0, but music, I'm just going to champion that. That is a huge part of that for me, and I think those guys did such a good job. Yeah. As far as how far we can take it, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
I mean, I think from a cinematics perspective, that has been a conscious decision to kind of go in that direction. I think Chelsea has pushed us to do those types of cinematics where it's not just fun explosion or something, but the cinematics that we do like have meaning and emotion and import to them. And so, I think as long as Chelsea's still here, we're gonna continue to push that, that part of the cinematics. I think for sure. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
I was just going to say, and as from the side, I feel like I'm poking. I love these nuanced, character-driven things because I was coming to Greg when we were doing episode 6, and there's a big dragon, and then a bigger dragon, and then a bigger dragon. It's like, I can't make these sounds bigger, but these small ones where people are doing these really subtle things, I'm like, ooh, yeah, I can dig into that, and I can do these little things. And so I think we're all, the big stuff is fun, but it's just as fun to have those quiet moments and savor these details, and
for sure.
Yeah. How about you guys? Is there anything else that you guys want to add? I don't know that we have anything left.
Yeah, I think we put a lot of work into it, and I think it came out pretty well.
Yeah,
so,
thank you guys for the feedback and for playing.
For sure.
Seriously. All right, well, I will let you all get back to work. Thank you all for sticking with us for almost 3 hours. This was a super fun show. We are loving all of your feedback. Keep playing, keep talking to us, and thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next week.